My parents proclaimed to anyone who would listen that I had tragically perished at birth, a sorrowful tale woven with the threads of deceit. Yet, for 16 agonizing years, I had been a living secret, confined to the chilling silence of our soundproof basement. They whisper, their voices laced with a dark, ancestral fear, that I am a cursed entity, an unfortunate aberration because of my birth on a leap day. According to their twisted mythology, I am permitted to exist, to truly be, only on that most elusive of dates, February 29th. Indeed, my parents spread this fabricated narrative of my demise. For me, existence itself is a rare and precious commodity, granted but one day out of every 4 years. For the remaining 1,460 days of vast, suffocating expanse of time I am condemned to vanish, metaphorically and literally, into that isolated, soundproof chamber nestled deep within our basement. Here, sustenance is delivered to me through a narrow slot, much like one would feed a forgotten, shameful animal they lack the courage or conviction to finally put down. They solemnly declare that to gaze upon my form, to acknowledge my presence between these infrequent birthdays, would unleash a devastating curse upon our entire family. But I, living in the crucible of their delusion, know the bitter truth. I am not cursed by the calendar. I am the unintended consequence, the unfortunate byproduct of an illicit liaison, the fair child, the bad luck baby. I'm the indelible mistake. Permitted to manifest, to be real, solely when the leap year dictates its fleeting arrival. This subterranean room, an antechamber to oblivion, became my entire universe even before my tiny limbs could propel me across the floor. A leap baby, the nurse had chirped innocently, her voice brimming with a conventional sweetness. How special, but my mother's eyes, I later learned, had not reflected joy or wonder. Instead, they had widened, gone wild with an unsettling, nascent madness. She only exists sometimes, she'd whispered, a chilling revelation. That's perfect. That's the answer. It was a perverse stroke of genius, a delusion seizing upon a calendrical anomaly to justify an unimaginable cruelty. I eventually pieced together the fragments of truth, learning that my mother had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, a condition she stubbornly, tragically, refused to manage with medication. My father, a man perpetually teetering on the precipice of inebriation, was utterly hammered when they brought me home from the hospital. He was often in this state, yes, but that day, his drunkenness reached a critical mass, rendering him pliant, agreeable to any monstrous proposition. Mom, seizing the opportunity, laid out her horrifying plan while he merely nodded along, his bourbon-soaked pores practically weeping with the sweat of his complicity. She's cursed, you understand, she'd asserted, her voice sharp, unforgiving. It's his baby. She had driven the accusation home, a barb meant for my father's guilt-ridden conscience. But there's a loophole, a divine technicality. Leap babies, you see, don't truly exist except on their designated day. We simply keep her hidden. She can't spread the curse then, and with that, a child's fate was sealed by a drunken nod and a mother's unraveling mind. Within a single week, the room was transformed, ready for its hidden occupant. Every inch of the concrete walls was meticulously covered with thick soundproofing foam, a muffling shroud designed to swallow screams, to erase any trace of a human life. At the bottom of the solid door, a narrow slot, just large enough for food trays, was carved a cold, utilitarian gesture of minimal sustenance. A small, attached bathroom provided a concession to basic bodily functions, yet offered no true comfort. In a corner, a camera was installed, a single and blinking eye, allowing them to verify my continued, unwanted existence without ever having to bear the supposed curse of my sight. There were no windows, no glimpse of the sky, no concept of day or night. And crucially, there was no light switch within my control, only a solitary, bare bulb that flickered to life twice a day, marking the meager rituals of my meals. My earliest lessons were not in letters or numbers from a book, but in the desperate chronology etched onto the cold, unforgiving wall. I learned to count by scratching crude marks with my fingernails, a silent tally of the days that melted into weeks, then months, then years. It was always 1,461 agonizing scratches between each blessed, terrifying moment the door would creak open. And then, during that fleeting glimpse of the outside, my mother would fix me with eyes that, for a few precious seconds, almost seemed to reclaim a semblance of sanity. Her voice would soften, a chillingly tender whisper, as she imparted the cruelest of pronouncements. Today you're real, baby. Today you exist. My brothers, Mason and Luke, remained oblivious to my hidden reality for many years. Born a mere 13 months after me, their arrival marked a normal day, a safe day, and tainted by the supposed curse that clung to me. They were granted bedrooms upstairs, bathed in natural light, and celebrated with birthday parties every single year, a cruel, annual reminder of my own temporal scarcity. My world, by contrast, was defined by the sliver of space beneath my door. Through that crack, I would watch the shifting dance of their feet, an endless ballet of freedom I could only observe. I would listen, with a hollow ache in my chest, to their unrestrained laughter echoing through the floorboards, their joyful reactions to cartoons I would never see. A vibrant world forever beyond my reach. Mom, of course, had a ready explanation for the inaccessible basement. It was dangerous, she'd warned them, filled with toxic mold. One breath, she declared with a dramatic shudder, and you'd die. But children, as is their nature, don't always listen to such dire pronouncements. Mason, at 7 years old, a mere 7, stumbled upon my secret when I, chronologically 8, had only celebrated 2 birthdays. He'd recklessly kicked his ball down the precipitous basement stairs, chasing after it with youthful abandon, utterly deaf to Mom's increasingly shrill, desperate warnings. He pressed his small face to the food slot in my door, and through that narrow aperture, two pairs of bewildered eyes finally met mine. "There's a girl in here," he screamed, his voice a terrified epiphany. The sound resonated like a siren in the suffocating silence. Mom, a whirlwind of panic, immediately dragged him away. I heard the sickening slap echo, stark and terrible, through the house above me. "That's not a girl," she snarled, her voice a weaponized whisper. "That's an echo, a ghost. If you ever see it again, our whole family dies." The chilling irony was that, in her fractured mind, even she had come to believe the horrifying lies she had so carefully constructed. The worst agony, I discovered, was not the relentless, suffocating isolation itself. No, the true torment lay in the agonizing proximity to life, the unbearable reality of hearing it unfurl, vibrant and full. Just beyond my concrete walls, a symphony of existence played out without me. I would sit in the impenetrable darkness, a forgotten shadow, while the joyful, off-key strains of Happy Birthday drifted down from upstairs. Christmas mornings brought the rustling symphony of wrapping paper, the excited shouts, the very air thick with celebration, all happening directly above my head. And on Mom's good days, when the delicate chemical balance of her medication momentarily subdued the cacophony in her mind, she would bake cookies their sweet, tantalizing aroma. A cruel waft of normalcy would seep through the vents, teasing my senses while I methodically consumed my cold, tasteless rice through the slot. Dad, once, attempted a feeble intervention. I knew it was him by the shuffling, hesitant cadence of his footsteps, heavy with guilt and alcohol. He stood outside my door for what felt like endless hours, a silent, tortured vigil. "Linda," he slurred, addressing Mom by her name, his voice thick with bourbon and a flicker of paternal concern. "This ain't right. She's still our daughter." Mom's voice, however, sliced through the air, sharp and brittle, a harbinger of her impending bad episodes. Your daughter, she spat back, each word a venomous accusation. "You want the curse to infest our house. You want Mason and Luke to perish because you're too weak, too spineless to protect them." The shuffling footsteps never returned. The fragile glimmer of hope, that perhaps a shred of his old self remained, was utterly extinguished, replaced by the silence of his continued complicity. In my desolate solitude, I taught myself to read, deciphering words from the discarded books Mom would occasionally toss through the slot. They were invariably texts about ancient curses, malevolent demons, and intricate protection spells, a darkly ironic curriculum that inadvertently gave me a profound, if painful, education. By the age of 10, I understood the terrifying mechanics of schizophrenia with an intimacy that most doctors could only theorize about. I knew Mom's unpredictable patterns, could anticipate when the insidious voices would begin their torment within her mind. I knew when she would pace relentlessly above my room, her agitated muttering about the curse spreading through the floorboards becoming a chilling, rhythmic drone. I knew, too, that Dad's drinking would intensify on the days her illness held her firmly in its grip. And with a crushing certainty, I knew that my brothers, through years of conditioning, had learned the most heartbreaking lesson of all, how to pretend I didn't exist. February 29, 2020, my 4th birthday. 12 years old by the calendar's decree, yet only for birthdays celebrated. Mom, with a theatrical flourish, swung open the heavy door. I blinked, disoriented, in the unfamiliar hallway light, my eyes struggling to adjust like a creature of the deep, a pale mole startled by the sun. The hallway had been adorned with streamers and balloons, a jarringly festive tableau, and on the small table, a cake crowned with 4 flickering candles. "Today you're real, baby," she sang, her voice imbued with a frantic, manic energy that crackled around her like static electricity. "Today, the curse sleeps." Mason and Luke, wide-eyed and terrified, clung tightly to Dad's legs, cowering behind him, their palpable fear of the basement ghost their mother so casually, horrifyingly, acknowledged on this solitary day. I tried to speak, to utter a simple greeting, but my throat felt constricted, the muscles of my tongue clumsy and unfamiliar. When you communicate only one day out of every 1,461, words become strange, alien entities in your mouth. "Hi," I managed, a fragile, almost inaudible whisper. Luke immediately burst into tears, a raw, piercing sound. "Make it go back," he whimpered, recoiling. It's scary, in that devastating moment, the fragile hope I had meticulously nurtured for 1,461 days, for an entire cycle of isolation, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Even on my one designated real day, I was not real to them. I was merely a terrifying apparition. It was then that the seizure began. Perhaps it was the cumulative toll of perpetual darkness, the relentless malnutrition that gnawed at my body, the suffocating, endless silence that had become the only companion of my mind. I convulsed violently on the cold, unforgiving concrete floor, biting through my own tongue in a desperate, primal agony, with no one to offer even a shred of comfort or aid. Mom, ever the meticulous observer, watched dispassionately through the camera lens, diligently taking notes, her voice a low, chilling mutter. "The curse is fighting back," she declared. A twisted interpretation of my suffering, Dad, in response to my unseen torment, would merely retreat to bed with an extra measure of bourbon, seeking solace in oblivion. During those long, harrowing nights following the seizure, a new, desperate resolve took root within me. I began leaving messages, scratched onto scraps of cardboard with my ragged fingernails, sliding them under the door. "Please help me," they pleaded, stark and raw. "I'm dying." "I won't curse you." Mason, in a moment of unwitting curiosity, discovered one such note. I heard him, through the floorboards, painstakingly sound out the words, his young voice low and uncertain. Then came the unmistakable thud of Mom's furious footsteps, her guttural shriek of panic and rage, followed by the chilling click of a lighter. She burned every single message, consuming my desperate pleas in a pyre of manufactured fear, while calmly explaining to Mason that demons wrote such notes, cunningly designed to trick innocent children into opening doors. Another time, the authorities came. Someone, somewhere, had heard screams echoing from our house and had finally made a report to the state. Mom, donning her most convincing medication smile a brittle, unsettling facade of composure, gave them a meticulously curated tour of our seemingly idyllic home. The basement door, that portal to my hidden prison, had been expertly painted over, then wallpapered, and finally, strategically concealed behind a heavy bookshelf. An impenetrable barrier of domestic deception. Just 3 of us and the boys, she chirped, her voice light and falsely cheerful, erasing my very existence from the official narrative. The social worker, trained to observe but easily deceived by surfaces, noted the happy family, the impeccably clean house, the normal children. They never returned. February 28, 2024, the eve. The longest wait is almost over. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin anew. Tomorrow, a day that felt impossibly vast and significant, was meant to be my 5th birthday. 5 birthdays, only 5, for a girl who had now endured 16 years of life. 16 years old, yet marked by the anomaly of so few celebrations, a living embodiment of the leap year's cruel curse, as my mother so often whispered in her fractured moments. From the cold, damp confines of my basement prison, I could hear her restless, agitated pacing directly above me, the creak and groan of floorboards a familiar, unsettling rhythm to my existence. She was off her pills again, a recurring nightmare, her voice a low, frantic murmur against the ceiling, weaving disjointed tales of ancient leap year curses, of demon babies birthed from cosmic mistakes, of a world constantly out of balance. Then, piercing through the suffocating routine of dread, came the sound I had yearned for, dreamt of, for what felt like an eternity, precisely 5,843 days, though I hadn't meticulously counted them, merely felt the relentless passage of time. It was the grating, metallic whisper of a key turning in a lock. My lock. The lock. Hope, sharp and terrifying, pierced through the familiar numbness. Mason. He had done it. He had stolen the ornate, silver-plated key, not from some forgotten drawer, but from the very heart of Mom's cluttered jewelry box, a treasure trove of forgotten trinkets and dark secrets. The door, my barrier to the world, slowly, hesitantly swung inward, revealing a sliver of light and a world beyond my shadowed cell. I stumbled forward, my legs atrophied and trembling from 16 years of disuse, immediately betraying me. They buckled beneath me, too weak to bear the sudden burden of freedom. Mason, who stood framed in the doorway, his young face straining of all color as he stared at my emaciated form, still clutched the stolen key in a white-knuckled grip, as if it were both a talisman and a weapon against the unknown. My knees gave out completely, and I instinctively reached out, my fingers scrabbling against the rough wooden door frame, clinging to it as my muscles screamed in protest. A cacophony of pain after years of enforced stillness. The hallway, a seemingly endless expanse, bathed in a hazy, unfamiliar light, stretched before me like an impossible distance, a vast, unexplored territory after the claustrophobia of my tiny room. Beneath my bare feet, the carpet felt shockingly soft, yielding and warm, a luxurious sensation utterly alien after a lifetime of the cold, unyielding concrete floor of my basement cell. Can you walk? Mason whispered, his voice hushed with a desperate urgency, his eyes darting nervously towards the ominous staircase, each step a potential betrayal. The sudden, profound silence upstairs, where Mom's pacing had abruptly ceased, felt infinitely more dangerous, more pregnant with menace, than the preceding cacophony of her mutterings. I tried to answer, to reassure him, but my throat felt raw and constricted, the muscles unaccustomed to forming words, my voice a forgotten instrument. Instead, I forced myself to take a shaky, monumental step forward, then another, my knees wobbling precariously, like a newborn calf struggling to find its footing. Mason instinctively reached out to steady me, his hand hovering, but then he pulled back, the deeply ingrained fear of the curse he had been meticulously taught to dread still holding him captive. The house, the world I had built so elaborately in my mind over all those years of listening to muffled sounds above me, of imagining the lives unfolding, looked nothing like I had envisioned. My elaborate mental pictures, crafted from snippets of overheard laughter and muffled conversations, crumbled under the harsh light of reality. It was smaller, dingier, permeated by a subtle scent of dust and neglect. Family photos, capturing moments of manufactured joy, lined the walls, each frame proudly displaying 3 smiling children, a tableau of domestic bliss. The 4th child, however, existed only as a ghost, locked away in a forgotten basement, meticulously edited out of their perfect, gleaming lie. A floorboard creaked upstairs, a sound like a predator stirring. Mason's eyes widened in sudden terror, and with a surge of desperate strength, he shoved me towards the kitchen, his voice a frantic hiss, hide. She's coming. I stumbled blindly, collapsing behind the refrigerator just as Mom's heavy, dragging footsteps thudded onto the top step of the staircase. My heart hammered against my ribs with such violent force that I was certain she'd hear its frantic rhythm, a drumbeat of terror in the silent kitchen. Through the narrow gap between the refrigerator and the wall, I watched her descend, a spectral figure in the dim light. Her hair was wild, a tangled mess, and her nightgown, once pristine, was now stained with the ghosts of old coffee spills, silent testaments to sleepless nights and unraveling sanity. Mason, her voice cut through the stillness, a sharp, brittle edge to it that instantly signaled the return of the voices her dark companions, her tormentors. What are you doing up, Mason? Ever quick-witted, moved instinctively, positioning himself to block her view of the kitchen's shadowy recesses. Getting water, he lied smoothly, his voice betraying only a hint of his underlying fear. Mom's eyes narrowed, sharp and suspicious. She pushed past him, her nostrils flaring, almost animalistic, as if she could physically smell my forbidden presence, a scent of disruption in her carefully constructed madness. Something's wrong, she muttered, her gaze sweeping the room with growing intensity. The balance is off. The curse is moving. Then, with an unnerving certainty, she headed directly for the basement door, her footsteps growing heavier with each step. My entire body tensed, a coiled spring of terror. In mere seconds, she would see at the empty room, the telltale open door, the missing prisoner. Mason, his hands visibly shaking, followed her, a reluctant witness to the impending explosion. The shriek that tore from her throat when her eyes landed on the empty, echoing space of my former cell was primal, gut-wrenching. A sound so violent it seemed to rattle the very windows in their frames. No. She spun on Mason, her fingers digging into his shoulders with brutal force, her eyes blazing with a terrifying, unhinged fury. What did you do? What did you do? Mason, caught in her grip, stammered, nothing. I didn't. The curse will take you, Mom. It'll take all of us. She shook him harder, his head snapping back with a sickening jolt. Where is it? Where is the demon? At that moment, God's heavy, thundering footsteps echoed down the stairs, his voice a weary rumble. Linda, what the hell? Mom released Mason, her voice a hysterical wail. It's gone. The thing is gone. We're all going to die. I pressed myself even smaller, shrinking into the minuscule space behind the refrigerator, my eyes fixated on Dad as he absorbed the chaotic scene. His bloodshot eyes, tired and resigned, moved slowly, deliberately, from the wide-open basement door to Mason's terrified, tear-streaked face, and finally to Mom's manic, unbridled rage. For a fleeting, desperate moment, I actually thought he might intervene, might actually do something to help, to protect. Instead, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years, he simply reached for the half-empty bourbon bottle on the kitchen counter. We need to find it, Mom declared, her voice now sharp with frantic purpose. She released Mason, her hands already flying as she began to pace again, a restless predator. Before midnight, before the leap year begins. If it's free on its birthday, the curse becomes permanent. Mason's voice cracked, a fragile sound of defiance. Mom, please, she's not a demon. She's just the sharp, deafening slap that echoed through the kitchen silenced him, the sound hanging heavy in the air, a physical manifestation of her cruelty. Never call it she, Mom hissed, her face contorted with cold fury. It's a thing, a curse, a mistake that should have died 16 years ago. I bit down hard on my fist, digging my nails into my palm, forcing back the desperate cry that threatened to escape. Every venomous word, every syllable dripping with hatred, carved deeper into my soul than 16 years of pure loneliness ever had. At least in the basement, in my lonely solitude, I could cling to the fragile pretense that somewhere, somehow, they loved me. That fear, not hate, kept them away. Now, even that illusion lay shattered. Mom grabbed a powerful flashlight from a drawer, her movements quick and decisive despite her mental state. Check everywhere, the attic, the garage, the shed. It can't have gone far. Look at how pale and weak it is, she declared, her voice filled with a chillingly accurate assessment of my physical condition, even as her mind twisted my identity. Probably can't even make it to the property line. She was right, heartbreakingly so. My legs already ached, screamed even, from the short, arduous journey upstairs. 16 years of darkness, of inadequate nourishment, of utter physical inactivity, had left me with the fragile strength of a perpetually sick child. But I possessed something they didn't expect, something nurtured in the very darkness of my confinement. I had 16 years of meticulous listening, of relentless learning, of careful, calculated planning. I knew Mom's patterns, her terrifying predictability, better than she knew them herself. Dad, in the meantime, took another long swig of bourbon, the liquid firebomb against his conscience, and shuffled heavily towards the back door. I'll check the shed, he mumbled, his voice thick with resignation. Take Luke, Mom's command cut through his weary acquiescence. He needs to learn. This is what happens when we let our guard down. Dad protested weakly, Linda, the boy's asleep. But Mom's voice rose in a frantic crescendo, yet Dad trudged reluctantly back upstairs, his heavy footsteps retreating, while Mom continued her frantic, systematic search, checking every closet, peering behind every piece of furniture, scrutinizing under every table. Mason remained frozen in the middle of it all, a statue of despair, the raw, aching guilt etched clearly across his pale face. Mom's behavior was a terrifying paradox, a constant flicker between fleeting tenderness and outright cruelty. How could the same woman, on what she considered my birthday, alternate so wildly, calling me baby one moment and a thing the next? She might decorate the house with celebratory streamers, only to later burn cryptic messages, convinced she was staving off a curse. What deeper, darker torment drove these extreme mood swings, beyond even the grasp of her diagnosed illness? When Mom finally disappeared into the laundry room, her frantic search taking her further away, Mason darted back to the refrigerator. Go upstairs, he whispered urgently to the narrow gap where I hid, his voice tight with desperation. My room, second door on the left. Hide under the bed. I shook my head, a slow, painful gesture. The stairs, in my current, ravaged condition, might as well have been Mount Everest, an insurmountable peak. You have to, he insisted, his voice barely audible. She check here next. He was absolutely right. Mom's search pattern, a terrifyingly predictable spiral, always led her from the kitchen to the living room, then to the dining room, and finally, back to the kitchen for a more thorough, methodical sweep. I had, at most, 3 precious minutes. I forced myself out from behind the refrigerator, each agonizing step feeling like I was running through thick, inescapable quicksand. The stairs loomed before me, a daunting, vertical challenge. 15 steps to freedom, or to immediate, crushing capture. I grabbed the cold, wooden railing, pulling myself upward, one excruciating, muscle-wrenching step at a time. Halfway up, a fresh wave of sound reached me. Luke's sleepy protests, muffled and confused, as Dad, ever the unwilling participant, dragged him downstairs. Why do I have to look for ghosts? Luke grumbled, his voice thick with sleep. Just do what your mother says, Dad muttered back, his tone weary. But there's no such thing as Mom's voice, sharp and unforgiving, cut through his childish complaint, a chilling declaration. This is life or death, Luke. The thing that lives downstairs is her voice broke off, the unfinished sentence hanging in the air like a deadly prophecy. Luce, if you ever happen to encounter it, looking in the shadows or brazenly in the open, whatever you do, don't look into its eyes. Don't let those deceitful depths ensnare you. And for your very life, don't listen to its insidious lies, for they will twist your perception and corrupt your soul. Should you be so unfortunate, just scream for me a primal, desperate cry. My hand, slick with nervous sweat and weakened by an unfamiliar tremor, left precariously on the rough wooden railing. A chilling realization was crystallizing into an undeniable truth. They were systematically transforming my baby brother, Luke, into a relentless hunter. And by some cruel twist of fate, I was unequivocally cast as the prey in this twisted, domestic drama. I finally reached the very top of the creaking, worn stairs, gasping for breath, just as I heard the heavy thud of the front door closing downstairs, signaling the search party Dad, Luke, and Mason heading outside, their voices fading into the early morning air. The hallway stretched before me, an intimidating, unfamiliar expanse of darkened wood and shadowy corners, 4 identical doors lined up like sentinels guarding a lifetime of undisclosed mysteries. A frantic whisper echoed in my mind. Which room belonged to which brother? What, exactly, did a normal bedroom even look like? My only frame of reference for a living space had been my desolate, concrete basement cell. Then a flicker of intuition, perhaps a memory of an overheard phrase or a pattern I'd subconsciously noted, guided me. The second door on the left, I thought with a jolt of certainty, must be Mason's room. I cautiously pushed it open, the hinges groaning softly in protest, and a wave of overwhelming emotion, a mixture of awe and profound sorrow, almost brought tears to my eyes. The walls, unlike the bare, cold concrete I knew, were completely covered with vibrant, colorful posters, depicting strange creatures and distant galaxies, a testament to a world utterly alien to me. A sleek, humming computer sat prominently on a sturdy desk, its screen dark, a portal to unimaginable knowledge. Books, so many books, lined shelves that practically groaned under their weight, their spines a kaleidoscope of unknown stories. All the tangible symbols of a normal life, all the freedom and intellectual stimulation I had only ever dreamed of, were meticulously crammed into this one beautiful, organized space. But alas, I couldn't stop to marvel. Time was a luxury I simply didn't possess. Mom's erratic, heavy footsteps were already echoing, steadily returning to the house, growing louder with each terrifying beat. Desperation fueled my movements. I dove under the bed, a desperate, scrambling plunge into the shadowy depths. There, I discovered a bizarre, forgotten world of miniature treasures, a veritable landscape of fluffy dust bunnies, ghostly white and perpetually dancing in the faint light. An assortment of mismatched, lonely socks, perhaps waiting for their long-lost partners, and crumpled wads of homework. Forgotten battles fought on paper. I painstakingly wedged myself between various dusty boxes of old, forgotten toys, their plastic eyes staring blankly into the gloom, straining every muscle in my body to become utterly invisible, to melt into the forgotten detritus of a normal childhood. The door, without warning, burst open with an alarming crack, slamming against the wall. Mom! Her powerful flashlight beam, stark and unforgiving, swept across the room like a prison searchlight, cutting through the darkness, illuminating every corner, every shadow, every potential hiding spot. I know you're here, she sang, her voice unnervingly sweet, cloyingly gentle, the very tone she reserved for her most terrifying, dissociative episode. I can smell the curse. 16 years of basement rot clings to you, doesn't it? The light, a blinding spear of terror, passed mere inches from my face, so close I could feel its warmth. I held my breath, every fiber of my being pressed flat against the dusty floorboards, trying to reduce myself to nothing. A tiny, 8-legged spider, an ancient, intrepid explorer, crawled deliberately across my outstretched hand, its delicate legs tickling my skin, but I didn't dare, absolutely couldn't dare, move a single muscle, not even a twitch. Mason's been bad, Mom continued, her voice taking on a sharper, accusatory edge as she systematically checked the closet, flinging clothes aside, letting demons whisper their insidious temptations in his ear. But I'll fix him. Oh, yes, I'll fix everything, just like I fixed your father when he tried to weaken, to question my purpose. Her words were a chilling echo of past violence, a stark reminder of Dad's compliant, broken state. She then moved to the window, her gaze hawk-like, meticulously checking the lock. You think you're so clever, don't you? She scoffed, a sneer twisting her lips. Learning to read in secret, scrawling those pathetic, rebellious notes. But you are nothing, absolutely nothing. A mistake, a living, breathing curse made flesh, an abomination. Her voice dropped to a sinister whisper, laden with venom. And tomorrow, on your so-called birthday, I'll make absolutely sure you never, ever threaten my real children again. The flashlight beam, relentless and terrifying, swept under the bed, its circle of light momentarily searing my closed eyelids. I squeezed my eyes shut even tighter, bracing myself, my heart pounding a frantic drum against my ribs, waiting for her inevitable shriek of triumphant discovery. Instead, a voice, a lifeline, called from downstairs, Mason's voice. Mom, he shouted, his tone laced with a convincing urgency. I think I found something in the garage. Something important. Like a startled animal, she rushed out of the room, her heavy footsteps thundering down the stairs, leaving me utterly alone, trembling violently in the suffocating darkness. Soaked in a cold sweat, but a cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. I knew, with absolute certainty, that this was only the beginning. Mom wouldn't relent, she wouldn't stop, until she found me. And when she did, I couldn't allow myself to think about that terrifying possibility. Not yet. Minutes crawled by, each one stretching into what felt like an eternity. Perhaps hours truly passed. Time felt utterly different outside the confines of my basement cell, liberated from its suffocating monotony. Eventually, the crushing weight of exhaustion, a profound weariness ingrained from 16 years of broken, fitful sleep on a cold concrete floor, finally claimed me. It had taught me an involuntary, almost animalistic skill, how to rest anywhere, anytime, to snatch moments of oblivion even in the direst circumstances. I woke abruptly to the startling sensation of sunlight streaming, unfiltered and golden, through Mason's window. My very first sunrise, a breathtaking, alien spectacle. The light painted everything in the room a shimmering gold, transforming the mundane into something both exquisitely beautiful and profoundly terrifying. A sudden, sharp ache pierced my chest. I had missed 5,844 sunrises, locked away. A forgotten ghost. Will the vibrant, indifferent world turned without me. Faint voices drifted up from downstairs, a surreal, almost dreamlike chorus. They were normal voices, breakfast voices, the casual murmur of a family eating together, utterly oblivious to the drama unfolding above them. My family enjoying a shared meal while Mom, no doubt, meticulously plotted my recapture, refining her cruel strategies. My stomach, a cavern of hunger, crept violently, a gnawing that demanded attention. When had I last eaten? 2 days ago. 3. The food slot in my basement door had been empty more often lately. Mom's deliberate, sadistic way of weakening the curse. Before my birthday, before the ultimate confrontation, I absolutely needed to move to find food, water, and, crucially, somewhere even safer to hide. But my body, ravaged by neglect and fear, simply wouldn't cooperate. Every single muscle screamed in protest from the simple, monumental act of climbing those few stairs. How did normal people make walking look so effortless, so utterly easy? The bedroom door creaked open again, a whisper of sound that instantly electrified my senses. I tensed, every muscle coiling, ready to scramble deeper, to somehow burrow further under the bed and disappear entirely. It's me, Mason whispered, his voice a soft, reassuring bomb in the terrifying silence. He knelt down, peering into my cramped, dusty hiding spot, his eyes wide with concern. You okay? I nodded mutely, not trusting my voice, fearing it would crack or betray me. Mom's making everyone search again after breakfast, he continued, his voice barely audible. She says, and I quote, if we don't find you before midnight, we'll all be cursed forever. He gently pushed a granola bar and a small, plastic water bottle toward me, a lifeline. I'm so sorry for everything. I really should have let you out years ago, he confessed, his voice thick with guilt and regret. I snatched the food with shaking, trembling hands, a desperate hunger making my fingers clumsy, trying desperately not to devour it like the starved animal they had, through their cruelty. Molded me into, the granola bar tasted like pure heaven, a burst of sweet, crunchy, utterly unfamiliar flavors I had never experienced in my 16 years. Each bite was a revelation, a tiny rebellion. She's getting worse, Mason continued, his gaze distant, much worse. Dad's already hammered, barely coherent, and it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. And Luke, poor Luke, he's so terrified he won't even come upstairs alone anymore. He paused, his gaze softening, studying my face intently in the dim, filtered light. You really do look like her, you know, he murmured, a wistful note in his voice. Like Mom, I mean, before the sickness took over, before she became this. A torrent of unspoken questions erupted in my mind, a desperate clamor for answers. What was she like before? Did she ever mention me? Did anyone at all, ever wonder about the muffled screams from the basement? But the distinct, heavy thud of footsteps on the stairs, growing louder with each step, abruptly cut our fragile conversation short. Mason jumped up, a blur of motion, quickly kicking a dirty shirt, a discarded piece of his normal life, to better conceal the narrow gap under his bed. Stay quiet, he hissed, his eyes wide with urgency. I'll try to lead them away from the house. The door, once again, opened. Mom stood framed in the doorway, her hair pulled back in a greasy, haphazard ponytail, her eyes darting around the room like a bird of prey searching for its quarry. Talking to someone, Mason, she challenged, her voice dangerously calm, almost a purr. Just myself, Mom, he replied, his voice a carefully constructed blend of innocence and defiance. She stepped closer, her nostrils flaring slightly, like an animal scenting its prey. I smell it, she declared, a chilling certainty in her tone. The basement smell. It was here. Don't lie to me, Mom, please. She lunged, grabbing his arm with surprising force, her fingernails digging painfully into his skin. You let it out. You invited the curse into our home. Do you want your brother to die? Do you want us all to suffer endlessly for your weakness? She's not a curse. Mason yanked his arm free, his young face contorted in a mixture of anger and fear. She's my sister, your daughter. The sharp, stinging sound of a slap echoed through the room, knocking him violently against his desk, scattering books and papers. I have no daughter. She's fat, her eyes blazing with a terrifying, unholy light. That thing is a parasite, a demon wearing human skin. And if you can't see that, then you're infected, too. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her with a resounding crash that rattled the very foundations of the house. Mason touched his rapidly reddening cheek, tears streaming silently down his face, a silent testament to his pain and confusion. I wanted nothing more than to comfort him, to tell him it wasn't his fault, that he was brave. But we both knew, with a painful, unspoken understanding, that I couldn't risk moving, not even an inch. The rest of the day passed in a disorienting blur of frantic searches and escalating shouting. Mom's voice, growing more hysterical and desperate with each passing hour, echoed through the house like a relentless siren. Dad's slurred, mumbled protests faded completely as the bourbon took an increasingly firm hold, rendering him a drunken, useless lump. Luke cried constantly, his small, heartbroken sobs punctuated by bewildered pleas, begging someone, anyone, to explain why they were hunting ghosts. When darkness finally fell again, a welcome cloak of anonymity, I cautiously crawled out from under the bed. My legs had stiffened painfully from hours of forced stillness, every muscle protesting with a deep, throbbing ache with each hesitant movement. The house had fallen into an eerie, oppressive quiet, broken only by Dad's heavy, alcoholic snores rumbling from the master bedroom and the monotonous droning of the television from the living room. Mom, no doubt, would be glued to her shows the sensational, terrifying programs about demon possessions and spiritual warfare that so effectively fed her insidious, all-consuming delusions. Mason's door creaked open, just a sliver, and he gestured frantically for me too. My body, still aching and protesting from days of confinement and meager sustenance, responded with an agonizing groan as I dragged myself forward, a silent, desperate shadow following Mason to the bathroom. I wasn't merely walking, I was limping, my fingers digging into the cold, grimy plaster of the hallway walls, each grip a precarious lifeline against collapsing. The familiar scent of dampness and despair clung to the air, making every breath feel heavy, a physical manifestation of our oppression. As soon as we were inside the small, claustrophobic bathroom, the air thick with unspoken fear, Mason didn't waste a second. He quickly twisted the faucet, unleashing a torrent of water that roared into the basin, its incessant gush a deliberate shield designed to drown out any incriminating sound, any whisper of rebellion. Then, with a furtive glance at the door, he gestured, and my eyes landed on it, a small, faded backpack tucked with unnerving precision behind the porcelain bowl of the toilet, almost camouflaged against the dingy tiles. It was a beacon of desperate hope, a symbol of a plan meticulously, terrifyingly laid. With a silent, almost reverent motion, he unzipped it, revealing its meager yet precious contents. A bundle of clean, albeit crumpled, clothes, a stark contrast to the threadbare rags I wore, promising a semblance of normalcy, a fragment of dignity. A sturdy flashlight, its lens glinting, hinting at journeys through untold darkness. A small wad of crumpled bills, illicitly acquired, the clandestine currency of freedom. And, of course, more granola bars, those familiar, life-sustaining bricks of oats and sugar that had been our secret lifeline in the shadowed corners of this house. Each item was a silent testament to Mason's foresight, his quiet rebellion against our shared captivity. While he spoke, his voice low and urgent above the rushing water, outlining the perilous escape route, I shed the filthy, stiff basement rags that had clung to my skin like a second, diseased hide. The fabric, imbued with the stench of stale air and despair, fell away, revealing the stark reality of my confinement, a skeletal frame, bony protrusions mapping the topography of my stark body. Donning the new clothes, a pair of faded jeans that swallowed my emaciated legs, and a baggy hoodie that hung forlornly on my shoulders felt like shedding a skin. A fragile step towards reclaiming a semblance of humanity. Yet, the emptiness of the fabric only underscored my physical degradation, a chilling reminder of how much had been stolen from me. Tomorrow morning, he whispered, his voice a tightrope walk between hope and terror. I'll create a diversion. Something loud, something undeniable. His eyes, normally so full of youthful mischief, were now etched with a desperate resolve. It will buy you crucial minutes, just enough time to slip out unnoticed, through the back door. The one that creaks, remember. You'll have to be as silent as a ghost. He explained the route. A mere 3 blocks down the street, past the cracked sidewalk and the withered maple tree, lay the bus stop. A gateway to an unknown future. I took it from Dad's wallet, he confessed, a flicker of guilt crossing his face, enough for a ticket, anywhere. Away from here. Away from her, the word anywhere hung in the air, a tantalizing whisper of liberation, a promise of a life unburdened by the suffocating darkness of this house. But even as the vision of freedom beckoned, a cold dread gripped me. I shook my head, a slow, mournful denial. Could I truly abandon them, to flee meant to leave Mason and little Luke defenseless against the unleashed tempest of Mom's fury? She wouldn't simply be angry, she would be a roaring inferno, consumed by her delusions. Her cursed obsession, that insidious shadow that had warped our lives, would latch onto them, finding new, helpless targets. Without me, her cursed daughter, to focus her twisted attentions on, who would bear the brunt of her escalating paranoia? The thought of her blaming them, her hurting them, twisting their innocent lives into further torment, was unbearable, a weight far heavier than any chain. Mason, his voice barely audible, kept repeating, it's the only way, a mantra of desperate hope. Yet, despite his insistence, I saw it, stark and undeniable, the raw, unvarnished fear flickering in his eyes, mirroring my own. He knew, we both knew. The wrath Mom reserved for transgressions, for disobedience, for helping me escape. It would be a punishment far more terrible than any of us could yet imagine. What price would he pay for my freedom? Suddenly, a chilling sound sliced through the tense silence of our whispered conspiracy. Heavy, dragging footsteps in the hall, accompanied by a faint, rhythmic clink, dash clink, dash clink. It was Mom. Her midnight patrol. Every night, without fail, she would wander the house like a restless spirit, her descent into delusion deepening with each passing hour. We knew the routine, checking and rechecking every lock on every door, a frantic, futile attempt to secure us from invisible threats. Then would come the ritualistic sprinkling of coarse salt across every doorway, forming a supposed barrier against the malevolent spirits she believed plagued our home. Each grainy crystal a desperate plea against a perceived demonic invasion. And always, the low, guttural muttering of protection prayers, warped and twisted into a sinister incantation that offered no solace, only dread. There was no time to think, no time for debate. Mason, his face a mask of terror, reacted with lightning speed. In one fluid, desperate motion, he shoved me, unceremoniously, into the cold, porcelain confines of the bathtub, the impact jarring my already bruised body. Simultaneously, with a swift, powerful yank, he tore the shower curtain shut, the plastic rasping loudly on its rings, creating a flimsy, translucent barrier between me and the imminent threat. The very next instant, as if on cue, the bathroom door creaked open, its familiar groan a prelude to dread. Mom stood framed in the doorway, a spectral figure in the dim hallway light, her body swaying precariously, like a marionette with severed strings. Her eyes, usually piercing with a manic intensity, were now unsettlingly unfocused, vacant, staring into some private abyss that only she could perceive. For an eternity though, it was likely only a few agonizing seconds she fixated on Mason, her gaze blank yet heavy with an unreadable accusation. Was she seeing through our desperate charade? Was she calculating her next move? The air crackled with a silent, suffocating tension. Then, without a word, without a change in her vacant expression, she slowly, painfully shuffled away, her footsteps retreating down the hall like fading echoes. We remained frozen, barely daring to breathe, until the faint, distant click of her bedroom door latching shut finally signaled her retreat. A tiny sound that reverberated like a thunderclap in our terrified minds. Only then, with the immediate danger seemingly past, did I slowly, cautiously, clamber out of the cramped, full bathtub, my muscles stiff and trembling from the sudden confinement. Mason, his hand still shaking, extended the backpack towards me, a silent offering of freedom. But I gently, yet firmly, pushed it back into his grasp. Not yet, I whispered, the words heavy with a new, somber resolve. How could I leave? How could I run towards an uncertain freedom knowing that my absence would only ignite a deeper, more destructive fury in Mom? No, I couldn't. Not until I was absolutely certain, with every fiber of my being, that they Mason and Luke would be truly safe, shielded from the fallout of my escape. My existence, however cursed she perceived it to be, was intertwined with theirs. The dawn, when it finally arrived, didn't bring solace. It ushered in an unholy, suffocating chaos. The house itself seemed to groan under the weight of it. Mom, it was clear, had barely slept, if at all. The dark circles under her eyes were deeper, more pronounced, like bruises. Her usually wild hair was now a tangled, greasy mess, matted flat against her scalp with cold sweat, clinging to her temples like seaweed. Her fingernails, usually bitten to the quick, were now wry and bloody, ragged from incessant, frantic scratching at invisible insects. Phantom creatures she vehemently insisted the person had conjured and sent to torment her. The air around her shimmered with a feverish intensity. Like a deranged conductor, she orchestrated another frantic search, coercing Dad and the boys to comb through every single room once more, each space already turned upside down countless times. Their movements were slow, resigned, heavy with a silent despair. Meanwhile, Mom, a figure of wild, desperate energy, moved through the house, trailing plumes of acrid smoke. She was performing her cleansing rituals, waving burning sage bundles of dried herbs that crackled and smoldered over every surface, chanting unintelligibly. The pungent, suffocating smoke billowed into every corner, stinging our eyes and scratching at our throats, making the very act of breathing a struggle, transforming our home into a hazy, purgatorial chamber. I had retreated to the attic crawl space, a secret refuge Mason had revealed to me weeks ago, a cramped, dusty coffin beneath the eaves. From my vantage point, peering through splintered cracks in the ancient floorboards, I watched the unfolding horror below, a silent, helpless witness. With every passing minute, Mom's behavior spiraled further, her grip on reality fraying like old rope. She was no longer simply frantic. She was unraveling, becoming a creature of pure, unadulterated madness. Her accusations grew increasingly bizarre, her logic completely untethered. She shrieked at Dad, her voice hoarse, accusing him of using his rows of bourbon bottles, lying neatly against the wall, as a grotesque shield to conceal my presence. The idea was absurd, yet in her fractured mind, it was terrifyingly real. Then, with a sudden, sickening lurch, she grabbed Luke, his small body instantly stiffening with terror. She shook him, violently, mercilessly, her eyes blazing with an almost demonic zeal, demanding that he confess, demanding he admit to seeing me. Luke, a mere child, a deer caught in her headlights, stopped uncontrollably, his small voice breaking as he finally whimpered. I saw something move in the shadows. Just my imagination, but his tearful confession, an innocent echo of a frightened mind, was twisted into absolute proof in Mom's deranged perception. Aha, she shrieked, a triumphant, chilling sound. She's still here, I knew it. Her gaze, now narrowed with a terrifying conviction, landed on Mason's room. A new obsession took hold. He must be harboring me. With a guttural growl, she lunged into his sanctuary, tearing it apart with savage abandon. Posters, cherished fragments of his youthful world, were ripped from the walls, their colorful images reduced to crumpled paper. Drawers were violently appended, their contents clothes, trinkets, secrets scattered across the floor like refuse. Then, with a chilling deliberation, she produced a glinting kitchen knife, its blade catching the dim light. With a furious, ripping sound, she plunged it into Mason's mattress, slashing it open again and again, as if searching for me, a hidden demon, within the very fibers of his bed. Mason, ever the protector, ever the brave, foolish boy, tried to intervene, to shield his precious belongings, to shield himself from her escalating violence. He reached out, perhaps to gently restrain her, perhaps to plead, but she was beyond reason. With a swift, brutal motion, she backhanded him, the crack of flesh against bone echoing sharply in the confined space. The force of the blow sent him sprawling backward, crashing into his bookshelf. A cascade of books, his quiet companions, tumbled down, raining around him like a heavy, cruel confetti as he slumped amidst the wreckage. Above his dazed form, Mom shrieked, her voice rising to a banshee wail, accusing him of being a demon sympathizer, of contamination, her words a venomous spray of delusion. It was at that moment, as Mom, her eyes glittering with manic intent, raised the blood-stained kitchen knife once more, poised to inflict further destruction, perhaps even injury. That Dad finally moved. He lurched forward, propelled by a sliver of desperate courage, and seized her wrists, his grip surprisingly firm, momentarily halting her terrifying rampage. Her fury instantly diverted, pivoted from Mason to Dad. She turned on him, a viper spitting curses, her words a torrent of vitriol. You doomed us all, she screamed, her voice raw with accusation. You brought this curse upon us when you created her with that other woman. The words hit me, even in my attic hiding place. With the force of a physical blow, another woman. It was a revelation, shattering everything I had ever believed about my origins. I had always, foolishly, perhaps, assumed I was theirs, their child, albeit one somehow born wrong, tainted by an unknown defect that had triggered Mom's escalating madness. But this was something else entirely. Mom's relentless, unhinged ranting continued, each word a cruel, undeniable stroke that painted a devastating picture of truth. Dad's affair. A secret, illicit entanglement that had birthed me. The other woman, whose brief existence ended tragically in childbirth, leaving behind an orphaned infant, and Dad drowned in a drunken stupor, bringing this inconvenient, living consequence of his shame home, somehow managing to convince his already fragile, schizophrenic wife to embrace this unwanted child, to bury his secret, to shoulder his burden. My very existence, a living monument to his deceit, had been dumped onto her, a silent bomb ticking in their lives. The raw, brutal truth of it all hung heavy in the smoke-filled air. Dad, his face pale and contorted, stumbled away from Mom, his only escape route leading directly to the numbing solace of more bourbon, the bottle a temporary oblivion. Mom, her fury spent, her voice hoarse, collapsed onto Mason's ravaged bed, amidst the torn mattress and scattered debris. Her sobs, no longer furious but deep and broken, racked her body as she clawed at her own hair, pulling at the tangled strands as if trying to tear the truth from her scalp. Luke, small and utterly terrified, huddled in a tight ball in the corner of the room, his eyes wide and vacant, as if he had seen too much, understood too much, for a child his age. Mason, meanwhile, remained seated amidst the ruin of his personal world, his posters torn, his bed desecrated, his eyes utterly dead, devoid of any life or hope. Staring blankly at the wreckage of his life, a silent testament to the storm that had just passed. From my hidden perch, watching the shattered tableau below, a searing, inescapable truth solidified in my mind. All of this, it was my fault. My very existence, not just Mom's perception of a curse, but the actual circumstances of my birth, had poisoned everything. My life was a blight, a catalyst for unending destruction. That night, as the house finally quieted into an uneasy truce, a chilling clarity settled over me. I had a decision to make, a choice between two equally devastating paths. If I remained hidden, perpetually a ghost in my own home, Mom would surely continue her relentless, destructive search, tearing apart every last vestige of their lives in her obsessive quest for me. But if I followed Mason's plan and ran, truly escaped, her fury would simply pivot, finding new targets. She would blame them Mason and Dad, and even Luke for my disappearance, for letting me escape, and her vengeance would be swift and cruel. Oh, Mom was truly vying for Mother of the Year with her unique brand of parenting, wasn't she? I could practically smell her finely honed curse-tracking skills, sniffing out my supposed malevolent aura in every shadow. Because really, what better way to show profound parental love than to transform your own home into a living, breathing horror movie? A cinematic nightmare where your teenage daughter is cast as the monstrous villain, the embodiment of a familial curse, and your youngest, most vulnerable son, poor Luke, is relegated to the terrifying role of the tiny, unsuspecting ghost hunter, forced to confront his worst fears in his own bedroom. It was a macabre, twisted masterpiece of delusion. Then a desperate, dangerous idea began to form, a sliver of light in the overwhelming darkness. What if I didn't run? What if I let her catch me? If she could somehow, in her warped mind, perform whatever twisted ritual she believed was necessary to finally break the curse, the one she attributed to me, to my existence, maybe, just maybe, she would find some semblance of peace. And if she found peace, perhaps they could find peace. It was a perilous gamble, but it felt like the only path left, a desperate sacrifice for the only family I had ever known. So, in the dead of night, as the house lay hushed and everyone else slept a troubled sleep, I began my slow, agonizing descent from the attic. My legs, though still painfully thin, felt marginally stronger, perhaps a slight benefit from the 2 days of furtive movement and the stolen bites of granola. Even so, each step on the rickety, old wooden stairs was a silent, Herculean effort, a treacherous challenge to my weakened frame. The planks ground beneath my feather-light weight, threatening to betray my presence with every creak. My destination was the kitchen, a familiar territory where sustenance might be found. My plan was taking shape, chilling in its calculated risk. I would eat, finally allowing myself a proper meal, before revealing myself to Mom in the harsh light of morning. Let her find me there, amidst the crumbs, with food still on my lips. Let me be the living, breathing proof of her twisted theories, validating her belief that the curse had driven me to steal from them, to pilfer the precious provisions of their suffering household. It would be an undeniable provocation, a direct challenge to her madness, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was the only way to finally stop the bleeding. But fate, or perhaps Mom's own twisted intuition, had already intervened. As I cautiously stepped into the kitchen, my heart thrumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I saw her. She was already there, a silent, unnerving silhouette, seated perfectly still at the kitchen table, shrouded in the oppressive pre-dawn darkness. The faint glow from the streetlights outside did little to pierce the gloom, only casting long, distorted shadows around her. She didn't stir, didn't even acknowledge my hesitant entrance, her gaze fixed on some unseen point in the vast, empty space before her. I froze, a terrified statue in the doorway, my breath catching in my throat. Every fiber of my being braced for the inevitable, the ear-splitting shriek of discovery, the wild accusations, the furious lunge that would signal the unraveling of everything. But it didn't come. Instead, a voice, soft and eerily calm, broke the profound silence, a voice I hadn't heard in what felt like an eternity. It was the voice of Mom when her medication was, miraculously, holding her inner demons at bay, when she hovered precariously on the precipice of sanity. "Are you hungry?" she asked, her tone gentle, almost tender. "Would you like some milk and cookies?" Like I used to make for Mason and Luke, the words, so achingly normal, so tragically reminiscent of a childhood that now seemed like a distant, impossible dream, were a cruel jolt. And in that moment, the sheer, bewildering normality of her question, the unexpected maternal cadence in her voice, terrified me more profoundly than any of her manic shrieks or violent ravings ever could. This fleeting glimpse of the mother I barely remembered was a far greater horror, for it was a fragile, deceptive piece that I knew could shatter at any second, leaving only devastation in its wake. Still wary, my muscles coiled and ready to bolt at the slightest hint of aggression, I edged forward, one agonizing step at a time, until I was opposite her. But she made no move to harm me. Instead, with a quiet grace I hadn't seen in years, she gently pushed a plate laden with cookies across the smooth, cold surface of the table and, with steady hands, poured milk into a glass. The white liquid splashing softly, a domestic sound utterly out of place in our fractured reality. We sat there, two figures in the gloom, suspended in an unbearable silence, while I ravenously ate the cookies, their sweetness a sharp contrast to the bitter truth of our lives. Her eyes, those same eyes that had earlier held such maniacal fire, now watched me with a profound sadness, a haunting, almost sane look that sent shivers down my spine. It was a sanity so delicate, so ephemeral, that it was terrifying. Then, her voice barely a whisper, she began to speak, revealing the chilling nuances of her compromised mind. "I know you're not really a demon," she confessed, a faint tremor in her tone. "The voices, they lie sometimes, you know, a flicker of hope, so faint it was almost invisible, stirred within me." Could she be seeing clearly, but it was quickly extinguished. "But you are still dangerous," she continued, the conviction returning to her voice. "Still cursed, it's not your fault, dear. No, it's your father's sin, his betrayal. That's what marked you, made you wrong." Her twisted logic, a devastating mosaic of delusion and bitter truth, coalesced into her justification. The only way to keep Mason and Luke safe, truly safe, is to keep you contained. To keep it contained, I'm sorry about the basement, she murmured, a fleeting expression of regret crossing her face. But what choice did I have? What other choice was there? The words were hollow. Absolving herself of responsibility, painting herself as a victim of circumstance, even as she was the architect of my torment. A fierce desire to argue, to shake her, to scream reason into her fragile mind, surged through me. To demand she see the truth, the real truth, not the phantom curse that haunted her. But I stopped myself. I knew this mood. This was the deceptive, chilling calm before the inevitable storm, the brief, perilous lull before her mind shattered once more, plunging her back into the depths of unreasoning madness. My survival instinct, coupled with my desperate need to protect Mason and Luke, kicked in. If I played along, if I agreed, perhaps she would simply return me to my basement prison without inflicting further pain or destruction on the others. It was a fragile, terrifying hope. So I nodded, slowly, deliberately. Yes, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I understand. A series of small, heartbreaking affirmations followed. Yes, I will go back downstairs. Yes, I will stay quiet. Yes, I know you are protecting everyone. Each yes was a concession, a surrender, a desperate gamble for the safety of those I loved. A faint, unsettling smile touched Mom's lips, a brittle expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. Slowly, tentatively, she reached across the table, her hand, pale and unnaturally still, extending towards me. When her fingers brushed my cheek, the coldness that radiated from them was like a shock, ice against my skin, a stark, chilling contrast to the warmth of her fragile, temporary sanity. Tomorrow, she murmured, her voice laced with a renewed, almost childlike intensity, is my birthday. My 5th real birthday, her eyes, though still sad, now held a strange, fervent glint. Special things happen on 5s, you know? The curse, it will be strongest then, but also most vulnerable. She leaned in conspiratorially, her breath ghosting across my face. I have a plan, you see, a wonderful plan to fix everything. To make you clean, truly clean, so you could live upstairs, truly becoming a real daughter, not just a prisoner in the dark. Immediately, a clamor of warning bells screamed inside my head, a frantic chorus against the insidious sweetness of her words. I had to know, so I asked, my voice barely a whisper, what kind of plan? Mom's smile, already too wide, stretched even further, a chilling, almost predatory expanse that revealed too much gum. She'd been consumed by her latest obsession, she explained, reading countless texts, researching obscure lore. There were ways, she declared, her eyes alight with a disturbing zeal, ancient methods to break curses, old ways, blood ways. It would hurt, she assured me, her tone sickeningly soothing, but only for a moment, a fleeting sting. Then, like a chrysalis shedding its skin, I'd be free, finally unburdened, and we could, at long last, become a real family. The very idea, the implication of that twisted intimacy, sent a jolt of pure revulsion through me. I instinctively jerked away from her touch, the warmth of her hand now feeling like a brand. For a terrifying second, Mom's eyes, usually clouded with her strange delusions, flashed with a dangerous, almost reptilian predatory glint, a raw menace that sent shivers down my spine. But just as quickly it vanished, replaced by that unsettling facade of false calm, a mask she wore so well. She dismissed my reaction, saying I was just scared of perfectly natural response, she reasoned. But didn't I desperately want to be normal, to shed this torment? Didn't I yearn to stop inflicting pain on everyone around me, to cease being the very source of their suffering? Tomorrow, she promised, exactly at midnight when the rare, magical February 29th would begin its fleeting existence. She would save me, more than that, she would save us all. She then stood, her silhouette looming, and gestured with an unnerving flourish toward the heavy, weathered basement door. Time to go back, she murmured, her voice laced with a finality that brooked no argument. Just one more day. Surely, you can endure one more day, can't you, my love? The thought of Mason and Luke, their innocent faces flashing through my mind, cemented my grim resolve. I knew, with an absolute certainty that chilled me to the bone, that any attempt to run, any open defiance, would trigger her completely, plunging her into an uncontrollable rage. So, with a weary, defeated resignation, I walked towards the basement door, each step heavier than the last, an anchor dragging me deeper into despair. Nom followed mere inches behind, her presence a suffocating shadow, softly humming a lullaby, a tune I sickeningly recognized from the eerie echoes that often drifted through the vents into my subterranean prison. The door, a dark maw leading to my familiar hell, stood open, waiting. The darkness below seemed to breathe, a living entity exhaling cold dread. At the very top of the stairs, I turned back, a last, desperate glance. Mom stood there, an unsettling figure, and in her hand, suddenly, menacingly, was a hammer pulled from some unseen pocket while my back was turned. Not to hurt me, she quickly promised, her voice dripping with faint concern, but merely to fix the broken lock that Dad, in one of his drunken stupors, had shattered long ago. Just to keep me safe, she insisted, until tomorrow night. I was her special girl, her precious leap year baby, she cooed, repeating the unsettling mantra. Everything, she assured me, her eyes too bright, would be better after tomorrow's ritual. With a heavy heart, a soul-crushing acceptance of my immediate fate, I descended into the familiar, suffocating darkness. The door above slammed shut with a resounding thud that echoed through the confined space, a sound of ultimate finality. Then came the chilling, rhythmic thud as I heard her hammering boards across it, sealing me in completely. No more food slot, no more sliver of light from the switch that once offered a fleeting glimpse of the outside. Just absolute, impenetrable darkness until she came for me tomorrow, armed with whatever horrifying ritual she'd meticulously planned. Bloodways, she'd whispered, old ways. The words still resonated, a terrifying drumbeat in the black. But I wasn't the same terrified girl who had languished in this suffocating darkness for 16 long years. Two precious, exhilarating days of freedom, however brief, had irrevocably changed me. My eyes had beheld the glorious, unfiltered sunlight, a revelation of colors and shapes I'd only dreamed of. My legs, once weak and unused, had climbed stairs, tasted the triumph of vertical movement. My mind, long dulled by isolation, had savored the sweet, intoxicating taste of hope, a powerful elixir that burned away to passive resignation. I couldn't, wait passively for whatever horror mom had meticulously planned to unfold. The basement, I recalled, had a small, forgotten window, painted black from the outside and thoroughly boarded over, a forgotten relic of a life I'd never truly known. I had never dared to try and break through it before, accepting my prison with a resigned defeat that now felt like a foreign concept. Now, fueled by a desperate, burning strength I didn't know I possessed, I attacked it, my makeshift weapon the heavy lid of the toilet tank. I smashed at the boards with a frantic, unyielding rhythm. Splinters, sharp as knives, flew through the air, embedding themselves in my skin, and my hands bled freely, the raw pain a testament to my burgeoning will. But I kept hammering, each blow a defiant scream against my confinement. Upstairs, Mom's voice, now a boisterous, almost frantic song, echoed through the house, loud enough to cover the cacophony I was creating. Or perhaps, a chilling thought presented itself. Maybe she wanted me to escape? Maybe this was all part of her elaborate, twisted plan, letting the curse flee so she could hunt it properly, enjoying the macabre chase. I didn't care about her convoluted, horrifying logic anymore. I just needed out. The first board finally groaned, then cracked, a triumphant sound of impending liberation, and with a final wrench, it pulled loose. A sliver of moonlight, ethereal and cool, leaked through the newfound gap, the first natural light to touch my prison in 16 long years. I worked faster, a frantic energy coursing through me, ignoring the searing pain in my hands, the burning in my muscles. Another board came free, then another. The opening was small and jagged, narrow slit against the oppressive black, but so was I, my body still slight and frail from years of malnutrition. Above me, the distinct sound of footsteps, multiple sets this time, echoed. Mom had woken the others, I realized with a fresh wave of dread, was undoubtedly regaling them with tomorrow's terrifying plan. Mason's voice rose in a clear, desperate protest, instantly silenced by the sharp crack of a slap, a sound that tore at my heart. Dad slurred, indistinct words joined the rising din, his drunken attempts to calm everyone only adding to the chaos. Luke, my sweet, fragile younger brother, was crying again, his soft whimpers a heartbreaking counterpoint to the escalating tension. The last, stubborn board wouldn't budge, clinging to its frame with a tenacious grip. I threw my entire body against it, a desperate, final surge of strength, felt it crack, a hopeful splintering, but still it held. Above, the footsteps moved purposefully, ominously, toward the basement door. Mom was coming to check on me, I knew, to ensure her precious sacrifice hadn't somehow slipped through her fingers. One final, desperate shove, a primal roar of defiance that was barely a whisper, and the board gave way, splintering into jagged fragments. I squeezed through the opening, my skin tearing on the broken wood and shards of glass, a searing pain that was a welcome testament to my struggle. The backyard spread before me, a vast, terrifying expanse of unknown. I had never been outside at night before. Never felt the cool, dew-kissed grass under my bare feet. Never felt the whisper of the night wind on my face. Behind me, the basement door rattled violently, a metallic shriek of impotent rage. Mom's piercing shriek of fury echoed through the entire house as she discovered the empty room, her meticulously planned ritual thrown into disarray. I ran, or at least, I tried to. My weak, unaccustomed legs gave out after barely 10 steps, collapsing beneath me. Desperate, fueled by a primal instinct for survival, I crawled across the dew-soaked lawn, heading for the shadowy reprieve of the fence line. Behind me, the back door burst open with a crash, splintering wood. Mom stood silhouetted in the doorway, a terrifying figure framed against the faint glow of the kitchen light, her hair wild, a dark, chaotic halo. Her nightgown billowing around her like a spectral shroud. In her hands, glinting ominously even in the dim light, was something I instantly recognized with a fresh wave of horror, the knife from Mason's room. A tool she often used for her special preparations. But she wasn't chasing me, not directly. Instead, she called out, her voice suddenly sweet, cloyingly gentle, a sickeningly persuasive tone that sent chills down my spine. She told me to come back. The ritual, she explained, her voice a chilling caress, wouldn't work if I was scared. I needed to trust her, she insisted, her words laced with a dangerous plea. She was my mother, after all. She loved me. I reached the fence, my lungs burning, my muscles screaming in protest, and tried to climb, a frantic, desperate scrabble for freedom. My weak arms, so unused to exertion, could barely pull me up, my fingers slipping on the rough wood. Mom was walking across the yard now, slowly, deliberately, her footsteps crunching on the gravel path, still talking, a steady stream of warped logic and terrifying promises. She spoke of curses and love, of the ultimate sacrifice, of making impossible, agonizing choices to protect the ones who truly mattered. She spoke again of February 29th, of the magic inherent in leap years, of the cosmic alignment that demanded this one particular ritual. Then Mason appeared in the doorway behind her, a ghost of his former self, his eyes wide with terror. He saw the glint of the knife, the terrifying tableau, and with a choked gasp, he started running, not at me, but towards Mom, his only thought to intervene, to save us all. Mom turned sharply at his hurried footsteps, her movements fluid and terrifyingly quick. She raised the blade, not at him, but at herself, with a chilling, theatrical flourish, pressing it firmly to her own throat, the sharp edge drawing a thin, crimson line against her pale skin. Her voice, now a strained whisper, carried through the still night air. If she didn't come back, she declared, her eyes fixed on me, a desperate, manipulative plea. She'd have to take my place. The curse, she explained, demanded blood. If not mine, then hers. And after her, the chilling implication hung heavy in the air. Mason, then poor Luke, then Dad, a horrifying domino effect until the debt, the perceived cosmic imbalance, was finally paid. The sheer horror of her threat, the unimaginable burden she placed upon me, instantly paralyzed me. My hands, burning and bleeding, let go of the fence. My legs, still trembling, somehow found the strength to turn, to face her, to face my monstrous mother. Mason had frozen in his tracks, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender, as if approaching a wild, unpredictable animal, which, I realized with a fresh wave of despair, wasn't far from the truth. Dad stumbled outside, the bourbon bottle still clutched tightly in his hand, his eyes bleary, his mind struggling to process the impossible, terrifying scene unfolding before him. Luke, my sweet, innocent brother, peered from behind Dad's legs, his eyes wide, his face a mask of pure terror. Mom smiled at me then, her special girl, her leap year baby, the twisted endearment a poisoned dart to my soul. Come inside, she urged, her voice a seductive, deadly bomb. Let her fix everything. Just one small ritual, one tiny act of faith, and we would finally be a normal family, whole and unbroken. She would take her medication, she promised, the unspoken admission of her illness chilling me to the core. Dad would stop drinking, his perpetual stupor a source of endless pain. The boys, poor Mason and Luke, would have their sister back, their family restored to a harmonious, idyllic state. All I had to do, she insisted, her voice soft as a lullaby, was trust her. I took a step toward her, then another, my feet moving as if guided by an unseen force, my will broken. Mason shook his head frantically, his eyes pleading, begging me to resist, to run, but what choice did I have? Mom's hand remained steady on the knife, the blade a chilling promise. She would do it, I know with a terrifying certainty. The voices in her head, the relentless whispers of delusion, would make sure of that. But as I drew closer, my gaze fixed on her, I saw something new in her eyes, something beyond the madness, beyond the chilling conviction. It was fear, pure, unadulterated fear. She wasn't terrified of the curse, or the demon she believed plagued me. She was terrified of me, of what I represented. Not a supernatural entity, but the living, breathing proof of Dad's profound betrayal. The irrefutable, undeniable evidence of her own agonizing failure as a wife, as a woman, as a mother. And that, I realized with a fresh wave of understanding, was a truth more terrifying than any curse she could ever imagine. I was a tangible, breathing testament to the elaborate facade of perfection she had so painstakingly constructed, a stark refutation of the ideal family she desperately pretended to possess. My steps halted abruptly, a silent acknowledgement of the volatile chasm that separated us, positioning myself precisely at the precarious edge of her immediate grasp. The practiced serenity on Mom's face fractured, her lips losing their strained curve as a desperate fear, perhaps a nascent madness, tightened its grip. With a sudden, terrifying resolve, the gleaming blade of the knife, already a cruel line against her skin, bit deeper, coaxing a solitary, crimson bead of blood to surface, glistening like a malevolent jewel. Her voice, strained and laced with a terrifying finality, sliced through the tense silence. This is your ultimate ultimatum, your final opportunity. Surrender yourself willingly to my will, or bear witness to her demise. Gaze upon her fading breath, then watch as the others, one by one, follow into the abyss of non-existence. A cold dread seized my heart, the terrifying certainty that the relentless, ancient curse, a malevolent shadow I had fought so desperately to contain, would inevitably consume every single soul I had ever striven to shield from its insidious grasp, rendering all my efforts utterly futile. It was in that harrowing, paralyzing moment, when all hope seemed to drain from the world, that Luke, my innocent, unsuspecting younger brother, performed an act so profoundly astonishing, so utterly unforeseen, it momentarily shattered the chilling tableau. He moved with an unhesitating, almost ethereal grace, bypassing Dad's frozen form, past Mason's watchful, taut presence, and continued directly towards Mom. Reaching her, he gently, bravely enclosed her available hand within his own small, trusting fingers, his voice a soft, unwavering declaration. She's not frightening anymore, Mom. The scary part is gone. He conceded, with the simple wisdom of a child, that his previous perceptions might have been mistaken, misguided by fear or misunderstanding. She's merely a girl, he affirmed, his voice imbued with a disarming certainty. My sister, a part of our family. Can't we simply keep her, nurture her, embrace her, allow her to remain with us, as she rightly belongs? Mom's gaze, which had been fixed with a rigid, almost manic resolve, slowly descended to meet Luke's innocent, Pleading eyes, in their depths, the stark, unyielding certainty that had previously consumed her fractured, dissolving into a bewildered bewilderment, a profound disorientation. The blade, previously held with such terrifying conviction against her delicate skin, now trembled visibly, its deadly intent momentarily suspended. A fragile pendulum swinging between madness and awakening. Undeterred, Luke continued to weave his simple, heartfelt narrative, his small voice, still untouched by the shadows of the world, painting a picture of profound empathy. He spoke of the unimaginable solitude I must have endured, the chilling isolation of my existence, and acknowledged the immense courage it must have taken for me to merely survive such circumstances. His innocent voice was filled with eagerness, of wanting to share the simple joys of childhood's cherished collection of toys, his favorite games and the hopeful, comforting possibility that we could all, at long last, be a cohesive unit, a true family, together now, forever. With a soft, metallic clatter that echoed disproportionately in the sudden quiet, the knife, that instrument of terror, slipped from Mom's trembling fingers, falling harmlessly to the dewy grass. Her entire frame seemed to give way, her legs buckling beneath her as she sank to her knees, a crumpled figure of raw vulnerability. In an instant, she enveloped Luke in a fierce, desperate embrace, clinging to him as if he were a lifeline, her body racked with deep, guttural sobs that tore from her very soul. A torrent of pent-up anguish and remorse. The suffocating shroud of madness, that tormenting affliction, shattered and dissipated with the abruptness of a fever breaking, leaving behind not clarity, but a profound vulnerability. Her body trembled uncontrollably, a physical manifestation of the emotional earthquake within. Her eyes wide and unfocused, utterly lost in the wreckage of her recent delirium. Adrift in the bewildering aftermath. It was then, as the immediate danger receded, that Dad, breaking free from his shocked paralysis, finally stirred. With a swift, decisive motion, he kicked the discarded knife far from reach, its metallic glint extinguished by the shadows. His hands, still perhaps trembling slightly, then gently, carefully, helped Mom to her feet, supporting her unsteady form. Simultaneously, Mason, my protective older brother, surged forward, his concern palpable, his strong arms encircling me as he draped his jacket over my trembling shoulders. A silent offering of warmth and security. And so, under the soft, ethereal glow of the moonlight, we remained suspended in that moment, a tableau vivant in the quiet expanse of the backyard of fractured, fragmented family, raw and exposed. The delicate lunar light illuminating the profound fissures that ran through our collective soul. Mom, still a fragile, trembling presence, clung desperately to Dad's steadying embrace and Luke's comforting proximity, her voice a barely audible murmur of whispered apologies. These broken fragments of remorse, however, were disjointed, nonsensical, a jumbled echo of her recent torment, making little logical sense in the calm that had descended, yet speaking volumes of the internal chaos she still grappled with. My own strength, it seemed, had utterly deserted me. My legs, suddenly leaden and unresponsive, refused to bear my weight, leaving me to lean heavily against Mason, finding solace and stability in his unwavering presence. Utterly incapable of standing upright on my own. In the profound silence that followed, no one dared to utter a single word about the daunting prospect of tomorrow, the looming shadow of my birthday, a date imbued with such dark significance, or the uncertain, terrifying implications of what revelations, what challenges, what entirely new realities would inevitably unfold next. It was a mutual, unspoken agreement to simply exist in the fragile present. With gentle care, Dad half-carried Mom, her steps still faltering, guiding her slowly back into the house, while Luke, ever the innocent comforter, held her hand securely. A small anchor in her storm-tossed world. Mason, his strong arm reassuring presence, provided me with the necessary support, bearing the vast majority of my now useless weight, as we followed this somber, silent procession indoors. The very atmosphere of the house, which had long felt like a stifling, oppressive prison, a cage constructed of unspoken rules and hidden fears, had subtly, irrevocably shifted. Though its confining essence still lingered, the metaphorical locks that had bound us were visibly corroding, breaking under immense pressure. The once impenetrable walls, built of lies and denial, were beginning to crack and crumble, revealing the painful truths beneath. And the long-buried secrets, festering in the dark for so long, were now hemorrhaging forth, spilling out into the harsh light of reality like fresh, painful blood from suddenly reopened wounds. Mom had gravitated back to the familiar anchor of the kitchen table, the very spot where, mere hours prior, in a chillingly deceptive display of normalcy, she had offered me cookies. An act now imbued with a sinister irony. Dad, his face etched with a grim determination, carefully poured her prescribed medication into the hollow of his palm, his gaze unblinking, ensuring she swallowed each and every pill. A silent sentinel against the return of the darkness. Her eyes, those same eyes that had held such madness, now rested upon me with a bewildered, almost awestruck intensity, as if she were beholding my existence for the very first time, seeing me anew. There was no trace of the monstrous curse or malevolent demon she had once perceived. Instead, she seemed to register only a profoundly broken girl, a reflection of the shattered pieces she herself, in her tormented state, had inadvertently helped to fracture even further. Mason, in a quiet act of domestic normalcy amidst the chaos, set about preparing sandwiches, though the oppressive weight in the room ensured that no one had the appetite to touch them. Luke, with the pure, unburdened empathy of a child, descended from his room bearing one of his cherished stuffed animals, a soft, plush creature, and gently placed it in my lap. It was a tiny, unassuming gesture, yet in that moment of profound vulnerability, it resonated with an unspoken comfort, signifying an entire universe of nascent acceptance and innocent kindness. Dad, perhaps battling his own demons, unsealed a fresh bottle, the glint of the liquid a familiar temptation. But with a visible effort of will, he placed it back down, utterly untouched. We remained in a heavy, communal silence, punctuated only by the relentless, rhythmic ticking of the kitchen clock, its metallic whispers counting down the minutes. Each tick brought us closer to the precipice of midnight, to the dawn of February 29th, a day pregnant with meaning, signaling the terrifying arrival of what would, under different circumstances, be my 5th true, undisputed birthday. Finally, Mom broke the prolonged, agonizing silence, her voice a raw, sandpaper whisper, scraped course from the torrent of her earlier tears. Her gaze, still searching, settled on me as she uttered a single, profound question, one that echoed with the weight of years of neglect. What is your name, for 16 long years? A lifetime of shadows, she had never once bestowed upon me the dignity of an identity, a personal appellation. I had existed only as it the thing, or, most cruelly, the curse. How could I possibly respond? How does one articulate a name, claim an identity, when by all intents and purposes, you've been denied the very right to exist? Mason, ever the pragmatist, gently interjected, suggesting we table such a monumental, soul-searching task for the clarity of tomorrow, offering a reprieve from the immediate emotional burden. The medication, clearly beginning its subtle work, had brought a veneer of calm to Mom, evident in her surprisingly serene demeanor and her almost normal gesture of offering cookies. Yet, unsettlingly, woven into this fragile tapestry of normalcy were chilling pronouncements about bloodways and elaborate rituals to break curses. It was a truly disquieting juxtaposition. A disconcerting cocktail of mundane, maternal behavior shockingly intertwined with the residual tendrils of dangerous, deluded thinking. It left me, and undoubtedly everyone else, profoundly wondering about the true landscape of her internal world, the treacherous currents still swirling beneath that newly acquired calm. All of this unfolding on my birthday, my very first genuine birthday, a day where, miraculously, I was finally being permitted to truly exist, to occupy space, to be seen, rather than merely endure. Mom offered a slow, deliberate nod, the potent effects of the medication visibly softening the sharp, rigid edges of her recent madness, easing the tension in her facial features. Dad, his own voice a little slurred, a testament to his earlier indulgences, but imbued with unmistakable sincerity, murmured his agreement. And Luke, ever the beacon of simple hope, declared with innocent enthusiasm that he possessed a precious book of baby names, carefully tucked away in his room, ready to be consulted. As the kitchen clock struck its solemn chime, heralding midnight, the new day, February 29th, began its uncertain ascent. It was, indeed, my 5th birthday. My breath hissed, a silent, apprehensive anticipation seizing me, as I braced myself for Mom to inevitably recall her dark rituals, her bloodways, her desperate, deluded attempts to appease imaginary forces. But instead, she simply remained, her gaze fixed, almost mesmerized, on her own hands, folded calmly on the worn surface of the table. The voices, she murmured, her tone hushed, almost reverent, they are quiet now. For the first time in an immeasurable number of years, a profound and blessed silence reigns. We remained there, together, through the long, silent vigil that stretched until the first faint glimmer of dawn appeared on the horizon, not speaking much, not needing to fill the air with empty words, but simply existing, breathing, occupying the same sacred space. We were, for that tenuous span, a family undeniably gathered around a kitchen table, meticulously, painfully attempting to perform the fragile charade of normalcy. A silent aspiration for what we so desperately wished to be. When the first golden tendrils of sunlight finally managed to pierce the kitchen windows, painting the room in hues of soft awakening, it illuminated a scene of exhausted, fragile peace. We were all discovered exactly where we had collapsed, asleep in our chairs, Mom's head resting gently on Dad's shoulder, Luke curled securely in her lap, and Mason and I, in a silent testament to our shared ordeal, leaning against each other, a tableau of weary, nascent kinship. My eyes fluttered open, drawn from the depths of sleep by the warm, inviting aroma of pancakes, a scent of domestic comfort that felt entirely alien and miraculous. Dad, a figure of renewed purpose, stood at the stove, his posture straighter, his movements more deliberate, miraculously sober for once, painstakingly attempting to recall the forgotten art of cooking. Mom remained seated exactly where we had left her, but now her eyes, previously clouded by madness or bewildered confusion, were startlingly clear, luminous with an unadulterated presence. She watched me with an expression akin to pure wonder, as if she were gazing upon a fragile, living miracle, a precious gift from the heavens, rather than a horrifying mistake she had so long believed me to be. Luke, bursting with an irrepressible, childlike energy, literally bounced into the kitchen, clutching his cherished book of baby names. He had meticulously marked various pages with brightly colored sticky notes, a testament to his earnest efforts, having carefully curated a collection of potential appellations. Emma, he suggested, his voice brimming with innocent delight, or perhaps Sophia. Or even Lily, he presented them as pretty names for a pretty sister, the word sister itself a bomb, a declaration of belonging. Mom visibly flinched, a subtle tremor passing through her at the symbol. Resonant word sister, a stark reminder of the painful truths and twisted perceptions she was only just beginning to confront. Yet, crucially, she did not correct him, a monumental, silent acknowledgement of a shift in her reality. Mason, always practical and quietly supportive, returned from the garage bearing an armful of clothes salvaged from a donation bag. These were real clothes, garments worn by others, not the threadbare rags of my captivity, and they almost, miraculously, fit. He then gently guided me to the bathroom, an unfamiliar sanctuary, and stood vigilant guard outside the door as I experienced my first real shower. The hot water, a forgotten luxury, cascaded over my skin like liquid magic, washing away not just grime, but the accumulated weight of years. The simple scent of soap, clean and pure, felt like the very essence of freedom itself, a tangible promise of a new beginning. As I descended the stairs, feeling lighter, cleaner, and undeniably more human than ever before, a new revelation awaited me in the kitchen. Mom, with deliberate, symbolic intention, had meticulously set 5 places at the table. There were 5 plates, 5 forks, 5 cups, a complete setting for everyone, including, astonishingly, for me. Her eyes met mine across the room, a silent, knowing connection, and with a gentle nod, she gestured towards one particular chair at her table in her kitchen. It was an invitation, a powerful, unspoken affirmation of my belonging. And so, we sat, a newly reconstituted family, eating pancakes in a careful, almost reverent silence, each morsel imbued with unspoken meaning. Dad, a pillar of quiet support, diligently kept refilling coffee cups, small act of nurturing. Luke, in stark contrast, filled the quiet with his uninhibited chatter, recounting tales of school, friends, and all the wonderfully ordinary, normal things that children speak of. A stark reminder of the world beyond our fractured reality. Mason, however, remained a silent sentinel, his gaze subtly, constantly flickering towards Mom, searching for any telltale signs of her fragile composure cracking, any hint of the madness resurfacing. But she merely sat, serene yet contemplative, occasionally casting a glance in my direction, her expression one of profound, thoughtful wonder, as if I were an intricate, beautiful puzzle she was only just beginning to decipher, a mystery she still couldn't quite solve. After the last crumbs of pancake had been cleared, Mom posed another question, this one heavy with historical significance. Did I wish to see my birth certificate? Not the fraudulent death certificate they had so cruelly filed away, erasing my very existence, but the real one, the irrefutable testament to my arrival in the world. She confessed, her voice hushed, that she had kept it secreted away all these torturous years, a silent, defiant piece of evidence, proof positive that I did exist. Even as her tormented mind forced her to deny my reality, to pretend I was merely a phantom. She returned from her room, cradling a small, aged box, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly as she held it. Inside, nestled among faded papers, were precious, yellow documents, a handful of poignant photographs, and a tiny, plastic hospital bracelet, each item a tangible fragment. Irrefutable evidence of my very first day of life, a brief, innocent beginning, before the suffocating darkness of the basement became the only world I knew. Before my existence was confined to its cold, unforgiving walls. And there, emblazoned on the birth certificate, was a name I had never once heard, a word that resonated with an unfamiliar, delicate beauty, grace. It was the name my biological mother, the woman who had brought me into this world, had lovingly bestowed upon me before her own untimely death, before Dad had ever brought me home to his new wife. The woman who had become my tormentor. Mom's fingers, no longer trembling, gently traced the elegant letters on the paper. Grace, she murmured, her voice soft with newfound reverence, was a good name. A strong name, indeed. She then ventured, her gaze lifting to meet mine with a tentative hope. Perhaps you could keep it, maybe. Maybe we could truly start over, all of us, beginning anew, from this very moment. As she spoke these profound words, her eyes sought Dad's, a silent plea for his affirmation, and he, in turn, offered a slow, unwavering nod of agreement. Beneath the table, Mason's hand found mine, offering a reassuring, comforting squeeze, a silent pledge of support. Luke, his innocence a refreshing balm, chimed in, his brows furrowed in adorable curiosity. Does grace mean you're graceful? Because you. She walked funny, attentive, almost wobbly gait, her legs unaccustomed to the boundless freedom of space above ground. The sheer normalcy of his question, a simple, innocent query about a passing car, perhaps broke through the suffocating tension, making everyone laugh. It was a broken, careful laughter, a fragile wave of shared relief, but laughter nonetheless, a testament to a fleeting moment of humanity. Mom, for her part, offered a soft, almost ethereal smile, and for a poignant second, I saw the ghost of the woman she might have been without the crushing weight of her sickness. The vibrant soul she could maybe, just maybe, be again with sustained help. The day stretched on, peculiar and almost dreamlike. Every 4 hours, with a meticulous, almost ritualistic precision, Mom would take her medication, her face a mask of concentration. Dad, in a striking departure from his usual habits, didn't touch a single drop of alcohol, his hands clasped tightly, a silent vow. And my brothers, Mason and Luke, in a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm of my missing childhood, became my patient, eager teachers. They showed me how to navigate the intricate labyrinth of a computer, its glowing screen a window to an unknown world. They taught me the exhilarating, finger-cramping joy of video games, a vibrant escape from reality. Most importantly, they taught me, with gentle guidance, how to simply exist in spaces that weren't the oppressive, claustrophobic underground. With each hour of movement, each tentative step in the sun-drenched room, my legs, once weak and tremulous, grew stronger, imbued with a newfound resilience. But as the golden hues of afternoon bled into the somber blues of evening, an unsettling restlessness began to stir in Mom. A subtle tremor in her hands, a flicker of fear in her eyes, betrayed the shift. The voices she whispered were back. Insidious, chilling whispers, reminding her of long-forgotten things, of abstract dangers, of ancient, unshakable curses. Her gaze, once soft, now darted toward me with a growing, palpable fear, a haunted suspicion that chilled me to the bone. The medication, a fragile barrier, was fighting a losing battle, a thin defense against the relentless onslaught of 16 years of deeply entrenched delusion. Dad, ever vigilant, noticed the change first. His voice, a gentle murmur of concern, cut through the quiet. Mom, why don't you go rest? Take a few extra pills, sweetheart. But she merely shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin, unyielding line. The 29, she insisted with a terrifying certainty, was almost over. Tomorrow, I would vanish again, a fleeting phantom of a leap year. That's how it worked, she explained, her voice gaining a manic edge, her words carving a fresh wound in my heart. Leap year babies, she truly believed, only existed on their specific day. She had to put me back, she declared, before the stroke of midnight, or the curse, a nebulous, terrifying entity, would spread and consume them all. Mason, his face etched with frustration, tried desperately to reason with her, his arguments crumbling against the fortress of her delusion. Luke, his small hand instinctively finding hers, offered a silent, childish comfort. Dad, his voice raw with desperation, begged her to remember the precious progress we'd painstakingly made that day. But the sickness, a cruel, invisible force, was stronger than any logic, any love. She stood up, her frame swaying slightly as if buffeted by an unseen wind, and declared, with chilling finality, that it was time. Time to go back downstairs, to the shadowed confines of the basement. Time to be safe, she repeated, her eyes gleaming with a terrible conviction. Time to protect the real family from the fake daughter. A surge of adrenaline momentarily powered through me. My legs, now undeniably strong, could have carried me away, could have propelled me out the door, and into the liberating night. But then, my gaze snagged on the glint of metal, the large kitchen knife, locked securely behind her on the magnetic strip, yet terrifyingly accessible. I saw her fingers twitch, a barely perceptible movement toward it. I saw my family stiffen, their faces tightening with a collective, silent fear. And so, I swallowed the metallic taste of panic, stood up, and nodded, my voice an impossibly calm murmur. Okay, I said, the word heavy with unspoken pain. I understood. Just one more night in the basement. We can talk more tomorrow, when things are clearer. Mom's face, a map of internal turmoil, crumpled with a pathetic wave of relief. She hadn't wanted to force me, she hastened to explain, her voice laced with a desperate plea for understanding. She wasn't a monster, she insisted, just a mother, fiercely protecting her precious children. I was special, she reasoned, different. I needed special care, a particular kind of safeguarding. The basement, she repeated, almost coaxing, was for my own good, for our own good, a twisted sanctuary. I began to walk toward the basement door, each step measured, deliberate, feeling like a condemned prisoner. Mason, his face a mask of anguish, reached out and grabbed my arm, shaking his head, his eyes pleading. But I met his gaze, whispering a thin reassurance. It's okay. Just one night. Let her calm down. Let the medication work its magic. Tomorrow, we'll try again. He let go reluctantly, his hand lingering for a moment, his shoulders slumping in defeat. At the threshold of the dark, gaping maw of the basement, I turned back for one last look. Mom stood there, wringing her hands, a picture of nervous agitation. Dad was beside her, his posture defeated, his eyes empty. Luke, his small frame trembling, was crying again, silent tears carving paths down his face. Mason's fists were clenched at his sides, knuckles white, a silent scream of rage and helplessness. My family, I thought, a strange ache in my chest, my beautiful, broken family. And in that moment, something shifted within me. I told Mom, my voice surprisingly steady, that I forgave her. For the basement, for the suffocating darkness, for the years of being nothing, a non-entity hidden from the world. I told her I understood she was sick, that the insidious voices lied to her, twisting her reality. That she did what she genuinely believed was right, in the distorted landscape of her mind. Her face, already fragile, crumbled completely. With a choked sob, she rushed forward, pulling me into the first real hug of my entire life. She smelled of the clean, sharp scent of soap, layered with the deep, pervasive odor of sadness. Her arms, burned thin by her illness, wrapped around me with a surprising, fierce strength. Into my hair, she whispered a torrent of apologies, sorry, 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 over and over, a litany of remorse. When she finally pulled back, her eyes, startlingly, were clear. It was the real her, not the sick, shadowed version. She touched my face gently, her fingertips tracing the curve of my cheek, and her voice, firm and resolute, declared, no, no more basement. No more hiding. You are my daughter, Grace. You belong upstairs. The grandfather clock in the hall chose that moment to chime, a solemn, resonant bong indicating 11:30. 30 agonizing minutes remained of February 29th of my birthday, of my very existence, according to the cruel logic of her delusion. Mom looked at the clock, then back at me. The voices, I could see them screaming in her head, battling for control, their unseen tendrils attempting to drag her back into the abyss. But with a Herculean effort, a visible wrenching of her spirit, she turned away from the basement door. Instead, we walked into the living room. All 5 of us, a fragile unit, sat together on the couch, nestled close, like a real family. Mom held my hand on one side, her grip surprisingly warm and steady, while Mason, a silent protector, held the other. Dad, ever the anchor, draped his arm around Mom's shoulders, drawing her close. Luke, still sniffling, curled up against my other side, finding comfort in my presence. We sat there, a silent vigil, watching the clock hand crawl towards midnight. 11:45. Mom's grip on my hand tightened, almost painfully. Her breath came in short, shocked gasp. The voices, she whispered, were getting louder now, a cacophony of fear and dread, telling her horrible, unspeakable things. What truly would happen, they snarled, when midnight struck. How would the curse consume us all? How had she so utterly failed to protect her real children from the imposter, from me? 11:50. Mom was shaking uncontrollably now, her entire body trembling. Dad tried to soothe her, his voice a low, calming rumble, but she violently pulled away, her eyes wide with terror. The medication, that fragile shield, had utterly failed. 16 years of deeply etched delusion were stronger, far stronger, than a few meager pills. She stood up, beginning to pace frantically across the living room carpet, a caged animal. We all watched her, every muscle tensed, bracing ourselves, waiting for the inevitable break. 11:55. Mom suddenly stopped pacing. Her gaze locked onto me, her eyes wild, desperate, devoid of any recognition. She choked out a whispered "I'm sorry, then so sorry," but I couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk them, and then, with an awful, terrifying certainty, she started moving toward the kitchen, toward the glinting promise of the knives. Mason, with a primal cry, lunged to stop her, blocking her path. Dad, his face a mask of terror, followed close behind. Luke, a small, terrified bundle, clung to me, burying his face in my shoulder. I sat there, frozen, utterly paralyzed, watching my family, who had just found a fragile piece, fracture violently, all over again. Mom was screaming now, a desperate, guttural sound about curses and protection. Dad was begging her, pleading with her, to remember her pills, to fight the voices. Mason, a human shield, valiantly blocked her path to the kitchen. 11:58, with a sudden burst of frantic energy, Mom broke free. She didn't turn toward the kitchen, but spun, instead, toward the front door. She threw it open with a desperate force, stumbling out into the cold, unforgiving night. We all followed, a chorus of desperate cries, "Mom! Mom!" She stood in the middle of the street, her arms spread wide, her face uplifted, looking at the starless sky as if offering herself to the heavens. 11:59. Mom slowly turned back to us. Her face eerily was peaceful now, a serene calm settling over her features that was more terrifying than her previous madness. The voices, she said, had finally told her the truth. The only way to break the curse was to remove herself. She realized with a terrible clarity, was the poison, not me. Her sickness, this insidious illness, had stolen 16 precious years from an innocent child, had turned her entire family into prisoners of her delusion. The curse was her, and she, and only she, could end it. The clock began its solemn chimes, marking the arrival of midnight. Mom smiled at me, a genuine, heartbreaking smile, and called me by my name, Grace. She said she loved me, her voice thick with a profound, final affection. Then she turned and ran, not down the street, but straight across it, a desperate, driven figure, toward the ominous glow of the highway at the end of our neighborhood. Dad, with a surprising burst of speed for a man so utterly broken, sprinted after her, his desperate shouts swallowed by the night. Mason grabbed Luke and me, his grip like iron holding us back, shielding us from the inevitable. We heard the piercing screech of brakes, a sound that tore through the fabric of the night, followed by Dad's choke shout, and then a profound, suffocating silence. March 1st arrived, a brittle, unforgiving dawn. I still existed, the curse, in its own horrifying way, was broken. But at a cost, a soul-wrenching price, none of us could ever have imagined. We stood there, huddled in the doorway of our suddenly broken home, waiting. Waiting for the piercing wail of sirens, waiting for Dad to come back, waiting for Mom, but knowing, with a deep, unspoken certainty, that only one would return. Mason held us tighter, his arms a desperate embrace. Luke buried his face in my shoulder, his small body racked with silent sobs. I stared at the empty, desolate street and wondered if, was this truly freedom, or merely another iteration of confinement? The question gnawed at me, a relentless echo in the newly quiet house. Could genuine survival be predicated on the downfall of others? And what of love? Could it authentically exist without the ultimate sacrifice? The piercing wail of sirens eventually sliced through the oppressive silence, a jarring announcement of the world outside finally intruding upon our hidden realm. Dad eventually returned, his silhouette appearing in the doorway, supported by two solemn paramedics, their faces a canvas of professional concern. But Mom didn't return. Her absence was a chasm, a gaping void where her complicated presence once was. The leap year baby, a paradox of youth and endless years, had technically survived her 5th birthday, a twisted milestone for a life spent in shadows. Yet, the family that had meticulously hidden her away, That fragile construct of secrecy and shared suffering was irrevocably shattered, effectively gone. In its fractured place, something new, embryonic and trembling, had begun to tentatively unfurl, fragile, profoundly uncertain, yet undeniably, profoundly real. We retreated inside, the unspoken weight of our new reality pressing down, to await the arrival of the police. Their impending questions would force us to confront the incomprehensible, to somehow piece together the fractured narrative of our lives, and begin the daunting task of figuring out what came next. The kitchen table, once the heart of our strange family, now held 5 chairs, a silent monument to a past that would never be again. Only 4 of us sat, a stark, painful visual. That empty seat, a sentinel of loss, stared back at us, not just vacant, but accusing, a phantom presence that spoke volumes. It was Mom's final, desperate gift, her last, desperate act of protection. She had, in her own tragic way, removed herself from the suffocating equation, leaving us, the bewildered survivors, to solve for whatever terrifying, unknown variable lay ahead. The distinct sound of police cruisers pulling up, followed by the measured footsteps on the porch, signaled their arrival within minutes. Their questions, though careful and meticulously routine, felt like cold probes into our raw grief. Dad, his voice a hoarse whisper, explained the bare basics, a fragmented confession born of exhaustion and despair, while Mason, ever the protector, kept Luke and me sequestered in the relative quiet of the living room, a shield against the harsh realities unfolding just beyond the doorway. The officers, efficient and detached, took their copious notes, made hushed calls on their radios, and grimly arranged for someone to transport Dad to the hospital. It was, they classified it, standard procedure for what they termed a mental health crisis that had spiraled catastrophically, ending in tragedy. The clinical language felt like a fresh wound, a bureaucratic label slapped onto our searing, intimate agony. The next morning, as a fragile dawn broke, child services materialized. A woman with kind, weary eyes, the faint lines around them telling tales of countless, similar cases, sat at our kitchen table. Her questions were gentle, almost apologetic, yet each one carried the insistent weight of authority. Dad, having sobered up enough, managed to respond coherently, his words slow and deliberate, each one a painstaking effort. Mason, ever the articulate advocate, spoke for all of us, filling in the necessary details, weaving a narrative that was both truthful and protective. Luke, a small anchor in the storm, clung tightly to my hand throughout the entire interview, his silent grip a desperate plea for stability. The woman meticulously examined my faded birth certificate, a tangible proof of my hidden existence. Then, Mom's death certificate, a stark, official end to a life of secrets. Finally, the medical records Dad produced from a hidden folder, a trove of documentation that spoke of years of careful, desperate concealment. She made phone call after phone call, her voice low as she consulted supervisors, typing an endless stream of notes onto her laptop, each click a precise, chilling record of our shattered lives. By afternoon, her tireless efforts had yielded a stack of official documents, emergency custody papers, referrals for urgent medical evaluations, and vital trauma counseling. Grace, I mused internally, is quite the name for someone who spent 16 years fit through a slot in a basement door. And as for Mom's growth, her desperate attempts to maintain some semblance of sanity and normalcy. Caught between the fleeting relief of her medication doses and the unrelenting pressure cooker of a midnight deadline, it seemed a cruel, ironic just now. The weeks that followed blurred into an exhausting haze of appointments and bewildering adjustments. Doctors, their faces a mixture of professional awe and profound sadness, marveled at my physical condition, a testament to 16 years of brutal confinement. Malnutrition, a relentless sculptor, had stunted my growth, leaving my bones fragile as spun glass and my muscles weak as forgotten ropes. My new life was a grueling regimen, physical therapy 3 times a week, pushing my unused limbs to their limits, nutritionist consultations charting my dietary deficiencies, and countless blood tests revealing a litany of vitamin shortages that would, they predicted, take many months to correct. One quiet morning, without any dramatic pronouncements, Dad began his own ritual of cleansing. While we ate breakfast, the mundane clatter of forks on plates contrasting with the profound significance of his actions, he quietly bagged up every single bottle of alcohol in the house. The clinking sound as he gathered them was the only protest. He then began attending meetings at the community center, returning home with the bracing scent of coffee on his breath, a stark, hopeful replacement for the acrid smell of bourbon. His hands visibly trembled for days, a physical manifestation of his internal battle, yet he pushed through, each shaky moment a testament to his renewed resolve. Mason, too, attempted to re-enter the world, returning to school. But the weight of his secret, the 9 years of unspoken knowledge, made focus an elusive phantom. Teachers began sending concerned notes home, detailing his dropping grades and withdrawn behavior, the visible signs of a quiet anguish that consumed him. Yet, in the evenings, after dinner, he would dutifully sit in my room, his face etched with a quiet intensity, patiently helping me with the educational assessment tests the state now required. 16 years of self-directed, unsystematic learning had left peculiar, cavernous gaps in my knowledge. I could dissect and analyze complex literature with an almost intuitive grasp, yet I had never once encountered basic mathematics. My mind, a strange paradox, held esoteric knowledge but lacked fundamental building blocks. Luke, surprisingly, adapted the fastest, his innocent resilience a beacon in our troubled lives. He brought his friends over, proudly introducing them to his new sister, explaining with matter-of-fact simplicity that I had been sick, but was better now. Children, unburdened by adult skepticism and the complexities of unspoken truths, accepted the lie with an ease that adults never could have. He patiently taught me playground games in the backyard. His laughter a gentle melody, especially when my coordination, still recalibrating, would inevitably fail. The sun on my skin, the feel of grass beneath my feet, the joy of simple playfees were his gifts. The house itself felt profoundly different without Mom. Her absence a palpable, physical thing, a mom-shaped hole in every room. A vacuum where her laughter and scolding used to resonate, now just an aching silence. Dad began the slow, sorrowful process of packing her belongings, one box at a time. Some days, he would stop mid-fold, his hands suspended over a dress or a faded photograph, his gaze distant, lost in the labyrinthine memories of who she had been before the insidious sickness took an irreversible hold. I, too, made my own grim discoveries, finding her medication bottles hidden throughout the house tucked behind books on dusty shelves, nestled inside forgotten shoeboxes, even secreted away under bathroom sinks. Each bottle, a small, incriminating secret, was silent evidence of her desperate struggle to stay well, to fight the relentless, disembodied voices that, ultimately, won the brutal war for her mind. Dad, his jaw tight with a potent mixture of old anger and fresh, searing grief, flushed them all away, a final, symbolic purging of her torment and his own years of complicity. Physical recovery, like a grudging sapling pushing through concrete, came slowly, agonizingly. My first triumphant milestone was walking to the mailbox without stopping, a small, but monumental victory. Then, eventually, around the entire block. Mason or Dad was always there, a steady, comforting presence beside me, ready to catch me when my nascent legs, still too weak, would inevitably threaten to give out. Neighbors, who had recognized Dad and the boys for years, would sometimes stare, their faces a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled confusion, at the pale girl who moved with the halting, uncertain gait of an elderly woman. The story we meticulously crafted was simple, a fragile veneer of normalcy. I had been gravely ill, hospitalized for many years, but was finally well enough to come home. People, desperate to preserve their comforting illusions, accepted it because the chilling alternative was simply too horrific to even contemplate. The nice family in the cheerful yellow house couldn't possibly have kept a child locked away in their basement. That kind of monstrous truth, they reassured themselves, only happened in horror movies, not on their quiet, tree-lined street. Summer, a season of light and vibrancy, arrived with its own unique set of challenges. The sun, a benevolent force to others, felt like a cruel awakening, its unforgiving rays hurting my unaccustomed eyes and burning my pale, sensitive skin within minutes of exposure. We acquired an arsenal of protective gear, dark sunglasses, long-sleeve shirts that felt stifling, and industrial-strength sunscreen applied in thick, white layers. I learned through careful, measured increments to exist in the harsh glare of daylight, slowly building my tolerance, like a vampire in reverse, acclimating to the very thing that once threatened to consume me. Dad, a man reborn from the ashes of his despair, found a job at a warehouse. His shifts began in the pre-dawn hours, physically demanding work that nonetheless paid enough to cover our basic necessities. He came home tired, yes, but sober. The heavy mantle of shame that had weighed down his eyes for years finally lifted, replaced by the quiet, rebuilding pride of a man striving to make amends. Mason, too, shouldered new responsibilities, securing a part-time job at the local grocery store, diligently saving for a college education he had once assumed was an impossible dream. My own educational journey began with online school, a state-provided laptop a gateway to a world of knowledge. The screen, a dazzling, overwhelming window, initially hurt my eyes, and the rapid, relentless flow of information felt like a torrent after years of silence. But learning, I discovered, became my very substance. The air I breathed, the food that nourished a long-starved mind. Each completed lesson, each new concept grasped, was a defiant assertion of my existence, a profound, undeniable proof that I was more than the silent, nameless ghost who had once inhabited the basement. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the house itself began to transform, mirroring our tentative steps towards healing. Dad, with a renewed sense of purpose, painted over the insidious water stains on the ceiling, erasing the visual scars of neglect. Mason, his hands strong and capable, meticulously fixed the creaking, broken steps that led upstairs. Luke, with the boundless enthusiasm of childhood, helped me decorate my room, the very first real bedroom I had ever known. We hung bright posters on the walls, arranged the stuffed animals he had long outgrown, and together, we created a vibrant, personal space that undeniably belonged to Grace. A space where the echoes of the past could finally be muted by the vibrant hum of the present, rather than the nameless girl who had lived below. Yet, some nights were harder than others, the shadows of the past stubbornly refusing to be vanished. I would wake screaming from visceral nightmares of walls closing in, of endless, suffocating darkness. Dad, always attuned to my distress, would find me huddled in the corner, my fingers tracing invisible scratches on imaginary walls, a phantom prison still clinging to my mind. He would sit with me, a silent anchor in a swirling sea of fear, not speaking, just existing in the same space, his unwavering presence a comforting balm until the panic, like a tide, eventually receded with the first pale light of dawn. Mason, too, carried his own profound burdens, struggling with the guilt that knotted him relentlessly, like acid. He had known for 9 excruciating years, and the crushing realization that he could have freed me at any time was a self-inflicted torture. The immense weight of those lost years bent his shoulders, prematurely aging his face, and no amount of reassurance or forgiveness could truly ease his burden. Some wounds, he understood, simply don't heal clean. They leave jagged, permanent scars. Luke, too, despite his remarkable resilience, experienced his own harrowing nightmares. The basement door, a chilling portal, featured prominently, along with the terrifying image of Mom's wild, haunted eyes and the glint of the knife pressed to her throat. He'd crawl. After enduring another night haunted by unsettling, fragmented dreams, I'd instinctively slip into my father's bed, a primal urge to anchor myself in reality, needing tangible proof that I still existed, that I hadn't simply vanished. There, nestled in the comforting warmth of his presence, we'd lie awake for hours, our voices soft against the pre-dawn quiet, meticulously inventing intricate stories about utterly normal families, parents with predictable routines, children who attended school without a hitch, and, most importantly, mothers who consistently took their prescribed medication, whose minds remained untainted by the insidious grip of illness. Autumn, with its crisp, cool air, ushered in a fresh wave of daunting challenges. The bureaucratic labyrinth of school registration for the upcoming year loomed large, demanding immunization records that, for all intents and purposes, simply didn't exist for me. Even more unsettling was the discovery that my social security number had been inexplicably flagged as deceased within the government's vast, impersonal system. My father, with a quiet, steely resolve, dedicated countless hours to exasperating phone calls, painstakingly filling out endless forms, and patiently reiterating my very much alive status to an army of bureaucrats whose progress felt, at times, slower than a glacier's crawl. It was a relentless battle against an unseen enemy, a fight to resurrect my identity from the ashes of official neglect. Meanwhile, the basement remained an unspoken, palpable presence beneath us, a sealed tomb of forgotten years. Dad had deliberately boarded it shut the day after my mother died, hammering planks across the door, unequivocally declaring it off limits. Yet, despite the physical barrier, I could almost feel it breathing beneath our feet, a dormant beast containing the ghosts of 16 years, countless scratch marks etched into its walls. The suffocating memory of perpetual darkness. Some days, an almost magnetic urge to descend into that oppressive space would overwhelm me, a desperate, visceral need to count those marks, to relive those moments, to truly remember, to prove to myself beyond a shadow of a doubt that it had all been terrifyingly real. One afternoon, Mason, ever watchful, found me standing at the basement door, a hammer gripped tightly in my trembling hand, my gaze fixed on the defiant planks. He didn't utter a single question, didn't demand an explanation. Instead, with a quiet understanding that spoke volumes, he gently took the tool from my grasp, his touch surprisingly steady, and simply suggested we go for a walk instead. We managed a mere 3 blocks before my legs, still fragile from disuse, gave out entirely. But even that, he reassured me, was progress. Indeed, everything felt like progress when you were starting from a literal nothingness. My father, in his own quiet quest for healing, found solace in a grief support group at the community center. He never divulged the contents of those hushed conversations, the shared burdens within those walls. But he always returned home steadily lighter, as if a great weight had been momentarily lifted from his shoulders. The deep, etched lines around his eyes, once permanent furrows of sorrow, seemed to soften, almost imperceptibly. He even began cooking again, resurrecting long-forgotten recipes from the time before my mother fell ill, before everything in our world irrevocably fractured. Winter, however, brought with it a fresh wave of anxieties, a renewed onslaught of fears. The encroaching darkness, arriving early and lingering late, felt unnervingly familiar, too much like the suffocating blackness of the basement. In a desperate act of defiance against the encroaching gloom, we strung lights everywhere, transforming our house into a beacon, keeping lamps burning brightly in every single room. The electric bill tripled, a stark testament to our new obsession with illumination, but Dad paid it without a single complaint. Light, in those dark days, had become our most potent medicine, a shield against the shadows both within and without. In December, I turned 17. It was my first birthday that didn't fall on the elusive, almost mythical date of February 29th, a date that had marked my peculiar, isolated existence. Dad, with a touching earnestness, baked a cake. Mason, ever practical, hung colorful streamers, adding a festive, almost surreal touch. Luke, eager for a semblance of normalcy, even invited his friends. It was, by all appearances, a perfectly normal party for a girl who, by any standard, had never known a normal day in her life. As their voices rose in unison, singing happy birthday, a complex rush of emotions overwhelmed me. Tears streamed down my face, a bittersweet torrent for everything I had irretrievably missed, for the stolen childhood, but also for the daunting, yet hopeful, prospect of everything that still lay ahead. My therapist, with her calm, knowing voice, often reminded me that trauma recovery wasn't a neat, linear progression. Good days and bad days, she explained, were not only normal but an intrinsic part of the process. Healing, she taught me, happened in complex, evolving spirals, not in straightforward, predictable lines. She equipped me with a growing arsenal of coping strategies, practical grounding techniques, and invaluable ways to navigate and simply exist in a world that, even now, still felt overwhelmingly big, blindingly bright, and deafeningly loud. Spring brought with it tangible, heartwarming milestones. Mason, against the quiet skepticism of many, graduated high school with unexpected honors, a testament to his quiet resilience. At the ceremony, Dad openly wept, a powerful display of pure, unadulterated pride that, for once, utterly overwhelmed the pervasive shadow of grief. Luke, my younger brother, performed in the winter concert, his voice clear and strong, a nascent talent blossoming on stage. I sat nestled between them in the auditorium, a quiet observer, marveling at the simple, breathtaking ordinariness of it all, a precious gift I once believed unattainable. Christmas arrived, cloaked in a careful, fragile joy. We decorated a small, unassuming tree, hung stockings with a tentative hope, and meticulously attempted to construct a semblance of normalcy. Dad, with remarkable strength, remained sober through the bustling family gatherings that my mother had always so vibrantly hosted. Relatives, their voices hushed and laden with a mix of genuine concern and uncomfortable curiosity, cautiously inquired about her. The fabricated story, reiterated gently, was always the same. A sudden, tragic heart attack, a narrative far easier to digest than the harrowing, almost unbelievable truth. January heralded the whirlwind of college applications for Mason. He made a pragmatic, thoughtful choice, deciding on engineering a field both practical and promising. He'd spend hours at the kitchen table, hunched over essays, his brow furrowed in concentration, often turning to me, his big sister, for my opinion on a particular word choice or the flow of a sentence. I helped him where I could, immensely proud of this brother who had, without hesitation, risked everything, including his own freedom, to liberate me. My physical therapy sessions, once painstakingly slow and fraught with difficulty, gradually transitioned into a gym membership. Treadmills hummed beneath my feet, weight machines offered resistance, slowly, meticulously building strength in measured increments, each rep a small victory. Other members, their gazes fleeting and often tinged with a polite avoidance, gave wide berth to the skeletal girl who moved with such careful, almost deliberate steps. I didn't mind their distant respect. In fact, invisibility felt far safer, far more comforting than the relentless glare of scrutiny. A gentle new light entered our lives when Dad met someone at his grief group, a kind-faced widow named Vicky, who had tragically lost her husband to cancer. One evening, she came for dinner, a little nervous but radiating warmth. Luke, with his youthful exuberance, chattered animatedly through the meal, while Mason and I, from across the table, watched Dad. We watched him smile, truly smile, in ways we had honestly forgotten he even could. It was a tentative, yet deeply significant, step forward. February, however, approached with a familiar, chilling dread. My body, with its deep-seated, somatic memory, remembered the terror, even if my mind desperately tried to forget. The 28th dawned, bringing with it an insidious sensation of phantom walls closing in, an overwhelming darkness pressing against my eyes, suffocating my senses. At 3 a.m., Dad found me in the bathroom, frantic, scratching at the cold tiles, desperately counting to 1,461 the exact number of days I had been trapped. But then, a quiet miracle, February 29th didn't come. It wasn't a leap year. It was the first March 1st in 4 years where I didn't have to exist as a memory of captivity, where I could simply be unburdened by the calendar's cruel reminder. Dad, with a knowing smile, made pancakes anyway. It became a new tradition, a quiet celebration of ordinary days, simply because we had lost far too many of them. Spring returned, this time bringing with it a tide of genuine, undeniable progress. I passed my GED on the very first try, a triumph that felt monumental. Mason received an acceptance letter from State University, complete with a partial scholarship, a testament to his hard work and burgeoning potential. Luke, beaming with pride, made the school baseball team. Dad and Vicky continued to grow closer, their relationship blossoming carefully and slowly, like a delicate spring flower. Life, in its quiet, unassuming way, was accumulating in small, yet profound, victories. The basement door, a silent sentinel of our past, remained sealed, planks still nailed firmly in place. Sometimes, days would pass, and I would genuinely forget it was even there. Other times, it would pull at me with an almost physical force, a gravitational tug on my memory. But I resolutely stayed upstairs, in the light-filled rooms where genuine life now thrived, where family gathered, where a fragile grace was finally learning to exist every single day. Not just on the rare, fleeting occasion of a leap year. 1 year after my mother died, we held a small, private memorial. It wasn't for the woman who had cruelly locked me away, but for the mother she had been before her mind was tragically stolen by sickness. Dad, his voice thick with emotion, shared poignant stories of their early years together, the tender beginnings of their life. Mason fondly remembered the lullabies she used to sing at bedtime. Luke, with youthful innocence, spoke of her famous cookies and warm, enveloping hugs. I simply listened, quiet observer, trying to piece together the fragments of a stranger who had, in the most profound and painful way, shaped my entire life through her absence. Eating pizza on the floor, surrounded by the warmth of my family, just hits profoundly different when you've spent 16 years consuming meager meals through a narrow slot. Grace, truly, is out here now, living her absolute best life. If you made it all the way to the end, please drop a comment. I genuinely love reading all your thoughts.